for joining me here for a podcast after the launch of Point 2. This is Jonathan and Neon, for those that don't know, directors of GGG. And we're here to talk about the launch.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's always good to have a chat. Obviously it's a bit of a contentious launch in some ways this time. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about that. But, it's always good to have a chat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I do have a lot of questions. So I think we'll just get right into it.
Sure.
A lot of people are pretty unhappy with the current state of the game, especially like our relative power to the monsters earlier on. And obviously we are finding some builds that are feeling okay and that are stronger, but I'm asking, are the slower and more challenging builds the intended pace of the game?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know that. Once again, we get this question a lot, right? Of just what is the pace of the game supposed to be? And I honestly find it hard to answer that because of the way that there isn't really an obvious way to even quantify that, given that players have so many different abilities. What I will all I can say is that if people are unhappy, then we will keep on improving things until they're not unhappy anymore. Because ultimately we want to get the smooth progression where, you start the game, you feel weak, you get
Estamos más débiles que antes.
you keep on feeling stronger and stronger.
¿Cuál es el nivel de poder aceptable para ustedes en el juego? Y es muy difícil para nosotros saber porque queremos que se sienta bien, pero no tenemos como una meta en particular, es lo que está diciendo.
It really comes down to okay, if you're talking about a weaker build, what build is it? And then we'll be looking into that and seeing what we can do to improve it. We just have to go through these things one at a time.
So I think right now the problem is that it's almost every build this week for a lot of archetypes.
¿Qué build está débil? Y vamos a verlo en particular.
Minority that people are like, oh, I found something that works. So it's almost like the reverse there. And
y dice prácticamente todos los builds están débiles.
What amount of time are you expecting people to take going through the entire campaign? Or
¿cuánto tiempo va a llevar hacer la campaña
en test?
O tú en particular, ¿cuánto tiempo tardas?
I actually haven't measured that on the current version, and it doesn't necessarily always work that way. The number of times I play through the full, and when you say
no hemos medido eso todavía.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the amount of time, doing that, I might only do that that full run 2 or 3 times in total as we're developing a class.
Yeah.
Much more often I'm either testing this part or I'm testing that part or whatever. And I honestly am not sure exactly what amount of time that's taking. But as I said, I don't know that the time. The thing is, the presupposition with this question is that that we have a goal in mind for the amount of time for the campaign. And the implication of that is that the campaign itself is not fun. But it's if that's the implication, then we just want to make that fun, right? It's the campaign should be fun to play. The amount of time it takes, to me, is not nearly as relevant as just make it fun, right? If you aren't having fun, we want to make sure that it is. So that's why, when we're okay, people are saying we don't like the Act 3 areas, make those shorter. It's well, what amount of, I don't think that quantifying that in an amount of time is the right way to look at it. It's here are some areas that are unfun.
Las voy a traducir, sino que estoy escuchando, es importante lo que está diciendo.
And then whatever the duration of time that takes will not be bothering you. And that may result in the areas becoming shorter, but making it shorter is not it isn't a time metric that we are looking at to determine whether or not the game
no
is
estamos
good.
midiendo cuánto se tarda la gente en hacerlo, sino si es divertida o no. Si la gente dice, hay una parte que no es divertida, tenemos que ver por qué no es divertida. No nos importa cuánto tiempo de tarde, sino debería ser divertido hacer la campaña.
And they might be right or they might not be right or whatever, but at the end of the day what we're looking at is just okay, you're obviously having a bad time, we want to fix that. So we're going to look at so what we'll do is we'll be okay, so you're saying Act 3 isn't good. We'll look at Act 3, we'll look at the reasons why it might be bad. We'll fix those reasons, and then that may or may not reduce the time. Or in this case, it definitely will. It's shortened it by a lot. But to me, it's the frustrating thing is when you go down a dead end and you're okay, this is bad, or and then you have to respawn, or then the area doesn't, the area despawns, and you're you have to do things again, that kind of stuff, right? That's the stuff that people don't like to do, and so that's what we sort of look at. And so then when it coming back to builds again, once again, it's okay, if you're not having fun with your build, then that is a problem. We'll fix that. But it's not there's a correct pace for the game to be played at as such. We just need to make sure that you're enjoying yourself.
Well, I guess the follow-up to that was I, along with many others, were not expecting a nerf to just how the campaign felt in general, right? In the last interview I heard, it really sounded like the intention was to target things at the top end. But there were so many things that nerfed us during the campaign here. And
well, the thing I would say about that.
I would like to finish.
Sure. Okay.
A lot of people are really wondering about the long-term direction for the game with that in mind, because they were also not
this brings exaltation.
expecting that. So
Just
a lot of people are wondering
if the campaign, to be clear.
That was going to be my question.
That was not our intention.
So
yeah, we
should be more powerful than we currently are during the campaign then.
Well, that one I will have to look at specific cases, right?
Muchas personas sienten que nos nerfearon fuertemente durante la campaña cuando pensamos que los nerfs iban a venir en el endgame.
Like nerfed Monster Life, and it's possible that we'd have to nerf Monster Life again if that's still a problem.
¿Cuál es la idea
that's the kind of thing that we can do.
de
but the thing
de
is
eso?
That, like,
Si no quieren que seamos más débiles.
The first thing we heard when everyone was saying this, the first thing we thought was like, what the hell? We didn't even nerf the campaign. Like literally, that's what all the developers were saying. We didn't nerf this. Why is everyone saying we nerfed it? And so like then it's like, well, we found a few things, but like we're still looking for what those things are. And like it's not always necessarily obvious with all the changes that you make and things, because I can absolutely tell you that our goal here was nerf the end game, right? Like nerf the no, it wasn't even nerf the end game. What it was nerf the things that were trivializing the end game before you've even managed to get the like your items and stuff like that, like just the really trivial easy shit. Like that was our intention.
Nuestra intención era nerfear las cosas que te iban a hacer demasiado fuerte antes de que pudieras siquiera llegar al endgame.
And when you say the minion change,
cuando la gente dijo que la campaña la nerfearon, nosotros nos quedamos como que what? Nosotros ni siquiera cambiamos la campaña.
Both of those were incredibly terrible. Yes, those were just fuck ups. And the thing is, it's so easy for shit for like that to slip through.
Well, we have a bit of and look, a lot of it is just because there's a little bit of like it's early access, so we're allowed. But we like are firing from the hip a lot here, and the stuff like that, like let's get it in there, let's try it out, see how people think, and if it's bad, we just undo it, right? Like we do regress on a decent number of things in the first few days of a release, and so yeah, there are some pretty blatant fuck ups. So yeah, that's exactly what happened with the rare minion life. It was
estamos disparando desde la cintura, o sea, es como decir, como estamos inventando un poco, y si algunas cosas salen mal, la cagamos y lo vamos a echar para atrás y listo.
Often, and it's like, well, they don't have anywhere near as much life as the rare, and then again, once people got enough AoE and all of that, it solved it, but it was just a bad experience. There was just nothing good about that.
Right. I think there was definitely a compounding of a few factors that were like on their own relatively small. But the thing is that and this is the question that I have is that like if people are still having a bad time during the campaign, if they're starting fresh now, because bear in mind as well that people will have an experience and then we'll change the balance behind them and then they still remember that the experience was bad and they're not playing it again to know that it got better. So the thing is, if you're playing it again and still having a bad experience in the campaign, then that would be a thing where it's like, okay, well, where are the campaign nerfs actually? Like we have to find where they are, because I don't know that there's anything intentionally done there that we're sort of aware of.
Tuviste una mala experiencia y cambiamos cosas
that one just means that,
y no lo pruebas, no vamos a ver si va a ir bien.
Sure. O sea,
si vuelven a intentarlo.
So the number one, especially to me, most oppressive thing is the relative speed of monsters compared to our abilities to set things up. Like whenever you're talking...
Hang on, but that's not a thing that changed though.
No, but that's been continuously bad. It doesn't matter if it's changed or not.
Okay, sure. But so what I'm saying is that so this is an example.
I think that has changed.
But that's just an example of something that's bad. So what I'm saying is that's not a thing that changed. So like if you're talking about like, is it your intention to nerf the campaign?
But we are weaker now, right? A lot of skills.
But if you're saying that's bad, I mean, that's a different question, right?
A lot of skills are weaker now, right? They were tuned down on a lot of things.
Por favor,
and things that people are starting
sea un
with weren't
hombre.
necessarily strong. So that relative speed of the monsters feels extra bad. Like you want to set up these combos and stuff, right? Where we're throwing down like a cyclone and trying to do like a combo move, but the monsters are way too fast. They're rushing us. It's not even like the bosses are the main problem, right? Like if you're seeing like clips...
Yeah, so let's talk about the monster speed thing. So one of the issues that we have is that if monsters are slower than the player, then combat is optional. Like it's just 100% the case. Like you cannot, if the monsters are slow, like anytime the monsters are slower than the player, then you can just run past them and they serve no, like they don't, like effectively you can just choose whether or not to engage or not. And like, I don't think that kind of gameplay is good. Now there will probably be some areas like, and the thing is, a lot of the time when people talk about stuff like this, it's like there'll be a few areas that are bad. Like I know there are definitely a few areas where like too many of the monsters are fast.
No me gusta la forma en la que lo está viendo Jonathan.
When you go to the last areas of Act 2, Like the Faradin are just really, really fast, and there's kind of nothing slow in the area, and so that's an example where like we probably want to make some tuning
I mean,
there.
to get more specific, like I have someone right now literally going through the areas, all areas in the campaign, and listing all the areas that have a disproportionately high number of monsters that are too swarmy or too fast. Right. They're doing it literally as we speak, and my intention after this is to go through. And so, like, I mean, a good example is like the canopy, right? Yeah, the canopy. Sure. The monsters are real fast, and then not only that, you're in a ritual with them in a tight, confined space, and it just you end up in this kind of moving around with packs. So if you're not fast enough to kill everything, you just get absolutely
en serio necesito escuchar completo.
I guess I'm a little.
But just to continue with that though, I just want to mention that like one of the issues we run into is like people will say, oh, you know, like things should never be faster than the player and that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, if we did that, then the game would feel pretty lame. So it really is a question of like targeted changes, like finding where the worst things are and then solving that issue.
I really disagree with that. So you were saying like if the monsters are slower than the player, then combat is optional, but like it's an ARPG. We want to kill the monsters. That's where all the loot is. That's where our XP is. Like, sure, you'll have some speedrun scenarios where people are running past them, but usually what ends up happening is that we're running past them, bunching them up in a large
Cada
bunch
palabra que sale de la boca de
Zizaran
me hace ser más fan de Zizaran.
That's a core part of ARPGs for a lot of people. So I don't think that being faster than the monster is as bad as you think it is. Like, we actively want to kill monsters. That is the entire premise.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with you that gather and killing is fun, right? And you should still be able to do that. But as I said, I don't think anything about the fact that some monsters are faster than the player prevents that. I don't think you can have areas where everything is slower than the player. Like, it really isn't that great. In PoE 1, in the distant past, we had that problem, and it just meant that running past monsters was the thing you did all the time. And then there were some changes, like, I don't know how many years ago it was, like, what was it, 4 years or something like that? When was the Act 1 like thing? Like, we made changes, we made a lot of monsters faster than the player. And at the time, and that wasn't negatively perceived at the time, it just made the monsters feel better that we had there.
Güey, se refiere al cambio de Acto 1 de Path of Exile 1, en el que todo el mundo dijo, what the fuck, el Acto 1 es más difícil que todo el juego.
It just shouldn't be that it's it's just that like you need to make sure you're getting the balance right.
Es ese cambio al que se refiere.
The theme with PoE 2 in general is that the target to hit is smaller. Like, because if we want the combat to be more engaging, then that means there's a smaller target that it puts more pressure on the balance to be right. And so I think that's the main issue that we're running into, is just that it's okay if okay, so this is sort of a larger topic, right? But effectively it's like
de ingeniero le gusta cómo Jonathan está atacando los problemas.
The knowledge ceiling is absolutely astronomical.
Pero esto no se trata de un problema que tiene que resolverse así. Tiene que resolverse a, ¿es divertido, da ganas de hacerlo o no? Y a veces los cálculos son simplemente irrelevantes. O sea, no es la forma correcta.
Having such a huge skill ceiling means that you can just trivialize the game right at the start. And so, like, what that also means though is that, like, if we get balance numbers wrong, like if a monster has like double life by accident in PoE 1, it like doesn't even really matter. Whereas if a monster has double life in PoE 2, it matters a lot. And so what I'm saying is that the threshold for what is right is like way tighter in PoE 2, and so that means it will just take longer to balance and get it all correct. But it really is the case, I think, that it's getting all those numbers right that kind of makes it like that will make the combat ultimately fun at the end of the day. And like if we're doing our job correctly, then we'll still have this situation where a good player feels like they dominate and a bad player feels like they have a good time. But we won't have a situation where if you're a good player, the combat is so trivialized that you literally never have a moment where you're in any danger or have any kind of like level of like sort of interest going on. And I think that's the worry that we have when we're looking at things, is like, if we get to the point where like a good player never has to face a single challenge ever, then I don't think that that's going to be a game that will ultimately be fun in the long term. And so that's kind of like, and like, so that is to me the reason.
El miedo que tiene Jonathan es que un buen jugador pueda trivializar el juego y no tener ningún tipo de desafío jamás. Eso no pasa ni en Path of Exile 2 ni en Path of Exile 1, ni en la 0.1 ni en ningún momento de Path of Exile 1. Puede que el desafío no esté en la campaña, pero va a estar en algún momento. La aleatoriedad es lo que hace eso. Aparte de que esa no es la forma de verlo, man.
It's just a lot harder in PoE2 context.
O sea, es un buen miedo para tener, pero eso puede agregar cosas interesantes.
To be what is the challenging content, whereas right now it's almost the reverse, where there's so many clips of like people like dodge rolling away from like packs, right, and they're getting chased down, maybe not having a counterplay, and they're like, oh my god, I'm just being chased down. So, and also I sort of disagree on the Act 1 changes in PoE 1 not being negatively received. I do remember there was quite a lot of people that really didn't like that.
Perdón, ya lo había olvidado.
Because of what you mentioned.
Man,
with,
Zizaran está on
the
fire, man.
Monsters is generally a bad thing. So I definitely do disagree with that.
Just because I'm like to have things to actually go and start to address. Like, can I get a gauge on what you think is like where in the game it starts to become a problem, or do you think it's like just straight out of the gate?
Straight out of the gate. Like even the second zone, like the first zone might be okay, but the second zone with the wolves, it's like pretty like instant where I don't feel like I'm getting that like ARPG playstyle.
But won't we be hurting more players than we're helping with that?
By making
like,
monsters slower?
Won't that immediately make it? Yeah, won't that immediately mean that like a ton of players who actually enjoy the game because the combat is engaging immediately, like what, doesn't it kill the game for them? Like what I'm saying is like it's easy to say like, oh, you make the game easier and everyone's happy, but it isn't the case. Like a lot of people prefer the game to like actually have some challenge in it.
Sí,
like,
que quiero discutir,
perdón. So every night I go home and I play, and I like do test runs of everything, right? And it's like if we made it so that there wasn't any challenge for me in Act 1, I wouldn't play the game anymore. And that isn't helping anyone, right? Like I need to keep playing the game every night to actually enjoy myself. It's like,
pero es que los desafíos están ahí. El conte es un desafío.
So on some level, it's like it has to be fun for me. And I know that if you like if you
hasta la bruja es un
get to the point
desafío.
of having like everything just be trivial.
La bruja
like,
del primer mini boss que tienes que pelear.
So that there has to be some level of challenge. Now
there's just a lot. I just thinking more on this specific. There's a big spectrum here. Like for example, I know I have seen the feedback of Act 1 minus canopy and mana. Feel generally good on the pacing, the speed of monsters. You feel like you can almost do no-hit runs, is like kind of what people have said. And then you get to Act 2, and it's not too bad at the very start. And then you get to the like Halani gates, and it's like, okay, now everything's gone off the reservation.
The Farah didn't have a problem.
And then you get
the Titan Valley as well.
I've seen a decent spectrum like that, and I 100% want to fix that. Like,
Okay.
So that's why I was asking you for your example, because there's just a lot of people on the different spectrums here that want different things, and so I'm trying to understand.
Pero pareciera que estuviera algún policía malo y el policía bueno. Mark es el policía bueno.
With you as opposed
en caso
to
no estuviese claro.
other players. So that's all I was asking there, because I do intend on slowing down those extreme zones, and I think there are like 10 of them. And I think that is at least something hopefully a lot of viewers are going to be happy to hear, which is like, okay, cool, they're going to address those. So the Dreadnought, Utsal, you've got Canopy, we're going to start. Those are the most egregious I'm listing.
¿Cuál es Canopy? No recuerdo ahorita.
Yeah.
And then you got areas like Titan Valley, which is just like riddled with annoying monsters that are just like out of control.
Titan Valley es un problema con las fichuras se meten, es un fastidio.
We keep working backwards until we catch as much as we can. And it's going to be a lot of different changes. So one could be, okay, like, why is it that there are 6 different varieties, of which all are just, as you've, heard people mentioning, and I think I saw something that you had thing, which is they're playing PoE 1. I think, which I thought was a funny comparison. Which I'm like, okay, fair enough. They need to, not every monster needs to slow down, but like, for example, some of them can be fast, and maybe the answer is, okay, they should be weaker. So sure, they engage you, but they die quick. Or maybe the answer is like, there's so many of them, and then in a lot of the cases, it's going to be like, okay, here's 6 different types of packs. Well, 6 of them are fast. Well, that's a problem. 5 is fast. That's a problem. 4 are fast. That's a problem. 3 are fast. That's probably still a problem. But 2 are fast. That's probably more acceptable. So you get 2 really slow, maybe 2 fast, 2 kind of in the middle, and you get some big slow monsters, some small monsters. And that distribution isn't quite right in a lot of zones, and so that's why I get why I asked, because I would say some zones have a nice.
Y yo ni siquiera siento que es un problema como tal, o sea, no activamente, sino como que juego de una forma que no es divertida cuando los monstruos son así.
Holy, I've just been 3 zones in a row where I'm just on edge, getting swarmed, like
exacto,
absolutely, and that
lo que acaba de escribir.
This extreme negative feeling of like I can't do the things that my skills want me to do, and that is bad, and that I definitely want to fix that, and I want to fix that imminently. Like I'm going to immediately get on to doing that. So there is a huge range of spectrum of players that want different things here.
Yeah.
Hello, Exile.
And I want to at least address that thing because I know that's just bad. Like, I think that's bad for everyone. I don't think that's bad for some people. I think that's bad for, everyone. It's for a huge majority. So we can start there for sure.
But to be clear, though, like we still do need to have some monsters that are faster than player. It can't be that none are.
Exacto.
And
O sea,
like things like the wolves in the second area, like if we didn't have that, then I think that you wouldn't even like. Once again, you wouldn't get the feeling of like you would immediately out of the gate have the game as just trivial, and like I think that really would hurt the game a lot. Like I think that would be a big problem. So it's really just a question of like. If there are parts that are frustrating, we'll address them. But like it isn't the case that just everything needs to be slower. It really would hurt.
So I think
there's another thing you.
I was just gonna say, I think there's almost like two different player bases where there are a lot of people that just want to blast and maybe have challenging bosses, and then there are people that want like the entire gameplay, every second to second moment to be like very engaging. So it's
engaging.
I don't know that I agree with that either, because I don't think it's so binary as you say. Like there is a middle ground that will work. Like I'm almost certain that there is, and the way that you get there is by just looking at the individual cases and just fixing every one of them until like the rough edges are all sawed off, sanded off, and then and then it kind of works. And like you'll get to a point.
En serio, yo adoro a Jonathan, me gusta lo que hace, pero necesita tener un entrenamiento de PR, man.
And that point won't be in the situation where everything is slow.
Lo que está diciendo estoy de acuerdo, pero la forma en como lo está diciendo.
I guess the problem with everything being so fast and
bro,
I pointed out
chat,
like everything
man. Mira el
almost
chat.
is because it's such a heavy focus on combo gameplay right now, but it feels like the speed of the monsters are heavily incentivizing like one button builds. Like as soon as I could, I was like, the less I can do, the better everything will feel, just because I don't have time to set up combos. We're getting completely overwhelmed.
En el momento que puedes jugar con un botón, juegas con un botón porque se siente mejor. No porque necesariamente quieres, sino porque se siente mejor.
It isn't necessarily the case that you have to use a combo on every monster. Like, if you've got stuff that's fast, you don't use combos on that, and because it's disrupting you. But then also, it is also important that
sí, pero no es el caso.
Monsters do disrupt your combos, because otherwise your gameplay just degenerates into doing like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Like the monsters have to be able, like there has to be situations where your plans are disrupted in order to.
No todos los monstruos pueden dañarte tus combos, man.
Can respond to things like you actually get some counterplay on stuff like that, and so the monster designs have to reflect that on some level. But like it's always an amount, right? Like there's an amount of that you need, and there's probably too much of that going on. But you still need an amount of that, or it just becomes all flat.
We've we've been talking about like, look, the last few days we've been talking about some like pretty extreme considerations and things, and like, talking about the monster life is the main thing, which you could argue is player damage, right? They're obviously
monster life is the easiest way. If everything is too weak, then monster life is the way to solve it.
Oh yeah, if there's a few outliers of builds that are find the tricks to do good, then yes, it is. I bring all players up or bring all monsters down. They're the same thing.
Makes sense.
And like we have been talking about a lot of this, and like actually going like, what would we willing to do here? How would we be willing to change it? What are we willing to test? What are we willing to try? And like there's heaps of things on the cards here. Like kind of honestly everything's kind of been on the cards, as long as we don't feel like at the end of the day that we've taken the teeth out of the game in terms of difficulty. Like that is what's important to us, is making the game still have a feeling of hard, being difficult, and I would say out more than just bosses. Like it shouldn't
Queremos
just be
que el juego se sienta difícil, se sienta peligroso. No solamente los bosses, otras cosas también. Pero tampoco queremos que se vuelva a ver qué palabra dice. Un soul, supongo, ¿no?
I know this is like way further away, but like again, we're talking about changing. It could be changing anything here. The one thing I also worry about is getting to the thing where I would argue a lot of the difficulty in PoE 1 outside of a lot of the boss fights is just like you occasionally just instantaneously die to something and you're like, I don't even know what I died to.
La dificultad de Path of Exile 1 muchas veces es morir a algo que ni siquiera pude ver. No queremos que eso se convierta. O que la dificultad sea que hay demasiado spam, demasiadas cosas. Y no queremos que Path of Exile se convierta en eso.
Then you kind of get that like, okay, you have to have it be that you're engaging with the monsters for it to be difficult. Which kind of means monsters do need to actually pose a threat, and you need to be able to see what they're doing and react to what they're doing. Now, I wouldn't say that's universally perfect, but that's an argument for like, you know, not wanting to get it to the point where it's too much of that just like, well, I guess that's an argument for de-swarming things, as you said, which I agree with, by the way. That is like an important thing because it is kind of getting towards that, and that contributes towards where things are slow.
El problema
que personally argue
Mark
that
ve
every zone
es como que hay un swarm de cosas, así como que un montón de cosas que se lanzan encima, dice que eso no deberíamos tenerlo, deberíamos eliminarlo.
Certain things are slow, and maybe there's that. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure where I was going with that, but I just want to.
Queremos que tú puedas ver qué va a hacer el mob y reaccionar a eso. En lugar de simplemente trivializar todo o que hayan demasiadas cosas que no puedas
I would actually say we're probably a bit too far there in a lot of the areas, but I don't think it is a universal problem right now.
I think also, especially, even though warrior is or May skills are particularly strong now due to being able to use a shield, but it can feel very bad that like every damage node like has a downside, whereas isn't really the case for the other builds, where like with maces, it's like, yeah, you get 40% increased damage, but 5% reduced attack speed. And reduced attack speed, especially with all these combos, can feel particularly bad compared to others. I would say like maces are kind of good right now, but a lot of that is a shield.
I actually do think there is a bit too much of the. I actually like a little bit of like here maybe a cluster or two having the kind of upside downside, but it's honestly something we've aside. You know, obviously keystones have upside downside, but yes, there's true that probably there's kind of too many passives, especially in the warrior section, that are a little bit too giving downsides, where it was something honestly that's a bit experimental to PoE 2. Like, we didn't have that in PoE 1, and we were like, let's give it a go, and maybe we went a little bit overboard with it in that part of the tree, but I don't hate it as a concept. I think it's just that it's
para eso me
parece
sincero, o sea, dice que en el lado de los warriors, que muchas cosas son como que daño, pero te quitan velocidad, dice que a Mark le gusta la idea de que haya como algo positivo y algo negativo, pero que tal vez pusieron demasiados en el warrior, dice que simplemente es algo que no hay en Path of Exile 1 y que dijeron, vamos a probar.
And so,
y estaban probando y capaz se les fue la mano, dice.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say keystones. I was saying the notables can be felt. And so part of the reason for the upside downside thing is that like it lets you do a larger damage bonus because it's got the downside, and therefore you're going to really feel that damage bonus.
No, they are good. Like, I think it's the frequency of them in that part of the tree.
But I'm saying that you can find another way maybe to do that, but it's like I do think that like having that feeling of like I really felt that node is something that we like. That is a thing that you do get, and that you know
that is important in our passive tree philosophy. Yes, is that the before and after of taking a notable, especially the first. Obviously, nodes become less valuable as you get higher level because they're just saturating into a bunch of diminishing returns. Well, not diminishing returns, but more like the 500 to 520% increase is going to matter less than the 0 to 20 and whatnot, but. Especially for the first chunk of the game, we want it to be that every notable is felt. Like you're like, I definitely now can feel the difference. And I would say, a lot don't hit that mark. Some do, some don't.
Está hablando de cómo dice que todos los notables al inicio, por lo menos deberían sentirse.
Bit of a pivot.
Yeah. So the next question, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you have only done like the crazy large changes between seasons. And you talked a little bit about that. You felt forced to treat the game like it was released. Are you still happy with doing only large balance changes between patches? Or is that something you would maybe revisit with something like every 2 weeks, especially with like a warning period? Like changes are coming in 4 days.
It's hard. I don't think that you can just nerf people in the middle of a league no matter what. Like we get highly punished for that. Look, I mean, people are going to be unhappy about nerfs whenever we do them, as you know, like as we can see. But like it is actually strictly worse if you get nerfed while you're playing the game. Now we're in a position now where because things like are probably possibly undertuned, that we can just do mid-league buffs, and so that means you'll see way more patch changes happening. Now because like it's okay to do major buffs during the middle of a league,
which we
just can't do. Yeah, which we're doing now.
I generated a relatively large list yesterday, which I know we have that whole philosophical discussion.
A la gente no le gusta que haya un nerf en ningún momento, pero durante la liga es peor. Pero como tenemos cosas que están muy débiles ahorita, vamos a poder bufearlas durante la liga.
And assessing what needs to be increased, right? So like. I don't want it to take as like I don't want people to take away from that as being like no, we're happy with the current balance. Like, obviously not. We're still going to make changes. We're still going through everything. And We'll get to that sweet spot.
Quiero que la gente
sure,
entienda de que no estamos felices con el balance actual. Tenemos que hacer cambios y vamos a hacer cambios.
Because like the medicine has gone down now we can start on all of the actual like all of the positive buff parts.
Que
and so it's like
ya pasó como la parte de la medicina, o sea, la parte fea. Ahora vamos a empezar con todas las cosas cool, con las cosas positivas.
Do that, right? Because it's like you already had
we genuinely tried to. We genuinely tried to. We had this plan of like bring all the top end outliers down and then make sure everything is feeling good in the middle. And we started with the bringing outliers down. And then all of a sudden, and this is why the patch notes were so late, we were like, oh no, like we're like running out of time here. Like we thought we could get through more of the balance and start bringing more things up.
El plan era nerfear todo lo que estaba en el top y buffear algunas cosas que estaban abajo para que el medio se sienta bien. Pero nos quedamos sin tiempo.
Our idea here is like, we thought we were, like literally up until the last minute, we were like, okay, we're gonna keep going. Right, let's start buffing. Let's look at weak things. And like, it just ended up being too time consuming. And so the answer here is now though, it's like, well, let's just keep going. And so obviously the first few days is really like looking at all the player feedback and going, what are the biggest problems, right? And this is where you get the Act 3 changes, you get the minion builds, you get the big things. And we are trying to address all of that. And I understand just game-wide balance is a big thing. But now it's just going to be like, all right, this skill. Like, let's go. What are we changing? Going through literally every single one on every single skill tree and every single reservation. And then we're going to go, okay, well,
vamos a ir por skill por skill y ver si le hace falta daño.
0.1% played. Okay, well, clearly not doing well enough. Let's target that and just go on.
El alcohólico de Chayula, 0.5% de jugadores lo juegan. Hay que hacerle algo.
Maybe we catch everything, maybe we don't, but like the intention is to not stop just because the release day happened. Like we had a goal, we didn't achieve that goal, and so we just need to keep going.
And do you have like a rough idea? Like you were saying you were working on a lot of things to be buffed. Do you have a rough idea on how early we could be seeing those already?
Well, we'll be seeing them continuously. Like okay, so this was
like 2 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like this was a funny thing because okay, like so, like one of the things I think that was majorly misinterpreted that things we're working on post was like this was the things we were working on that day. Like literally that was that day's worth of work that we were talking about. And then the next day it's like, well, now we're doing this Act 3 stuff. And like today we'll be doing a bunch of other stuff. And like, you know what I'm saying? It's like every day we're going to be like continuing to iterate and do stuff. It's like, the idea that someone's like, oh, they're not even acknowledging this thing. It's like, well, come on. We've literally had like, that was one work day. You know, like there's more stuff coming, right? Like,
which we need to be more clear about.
Sure.
We'll try to be more specific about that. But yes.
I mean, the one that I found the most funnier with that is it's like, I'm like, okay, we're going to look into all this Act 3 stuff, but in the meantime, we'll just add some checkpoints. And it's like, the reason I put that in there is because like, that's literally a thing we already noticed was bad. And it's like, it's not like hurting anyone to add some more. So it's like the idea that we're like, oh, we're just going to solve the whole thing by adding checkpoints was like ridiculous. Like, obviously that wasn't the case. It was just like, here's just a thing that I can just tell someone, hey, go do this while I'm looking at this.
Probablemente.
You know, like, and so they did that, and so then that'll go in the next version. But, you know, like, it's like, then it's like the next like 4 hours after that, I'm like sitting there going through areas and trying to work out what's, you know, like what needs to improve about them.
Yeah, so checkpoints is kind of something I want to talk about with the large zones and stuff. You made a post yesterday talking about that.
Yo no soy fan de los checkpoints,
Act 3 zones would be reduced in size.
Parece que es como una curita, una bandita que le ponen. Pero no es el problema. No es lo que soluciona.
Path of Exile 2 being aimed more at like doing one long playthrough and finishing up one character rather than do like 5 to 10 characters and the people that are playing thousands of hours per year.
I mean, I don't. That's,
no van a
again, it's not like
apuntar
I'm not targeting one or the other. Like your second. I mean, like if you're doing multiple playthroughs, the game is a lot faster just due to the like items and stuff that you have. Like that is definitely the case. You know, like
a big thing that's missing.
Like, making multiple characters in a league is certainly something that I expect and want you to be able to do.
Well, a big thing that's missing comparatively to
Path of
PoE
Exile
1
está orientado a que tengas un personaje muy largo o que hagas múltiples personajes.
In PoE 1, you have things like 7 step and stuff like that. And at least so far, we don't have that many alternatives for that. And our movement abilities are completely different. No Quicksilver. So even though like we can kill the bosses faster, but since the zones are so large, we can't get like the same amount of speed on our second and third character that we would be expecting in PoE 1.
Well, is the zone largeness issue like like, I mean, Act 3 was the one I would say that was like pretty obvious as far as like things like that go. But if it comes to other zones, it's just a question of what are those zones and which are the issues. And like also the other thing is that
Jonathan dijo que no estaba apuntando a uno o a otro, o sea, dice que no estamos desarrollando el juego para que juegues de una forma u otra, sino que sea divertido y que te ganas de jugarlo.
To know what you're looking for and sort of how to go places and what to do. So to the extent that isn't the case, that's why like when we're looking at Act 3, it's not just make this zone smaller. It's like, well, what's actually the reason why a player who is experienced is not able to find the thing that they're looking for, right? And that's where we come to like, oh, there's this whole area over here that you could just walk down and you have no idea whether or not that's important or not. And so then you end up doing that and it just wastes a bunch of your time. But like the intention is to make it so that like if you know what you're doing, then you know where to go and like you don't have a problem with that. So like that's why a lot of the changes in Act 3 are just like, okay, yeah, like you randomly get bad luck, and then the Chimera wetland has the stupid Y fork thing in it, and like takes ages to go one way or the other. It's like you get rid of all of that stuff, and then the zones won't feel so large because like you'll know where you're going and you'll know how to get, it kind of works out that way.
But I do know the layouts, so and they are very large, even with knowing the layouts, just because our movement speed is like relatively slow. Like even like Matland waterways, before they're getting reworked, hopefully the rework makes them a lot slower. But I know exactly where I'm going. I'm not like backtracking into the wrong area, making it longer. So it is just a lot of these zones are very long.
Like I understand that area is a challenging one, and it's hard for us to actually fix like trivially because just the way that the level generation works there, there's not an easy like. It's not like, okay, like other areas we can change the layouts very easily because like of the way that our generation works, but that area has a very fixed type of layout, and so it's going to take more effort, which is why it was on the list, because I didn't have an immediate like thing I could do that day to sort that one out. But like I understand.
Zizaran dice, yo conozco el layout, no hago backtracking y aún así es muy lenta las áreas, pues tenemos muy poca velocidad de movimiento.
That the issues that area has would apply to the whole game. Like that's just an area, a specific problem for that particular area.
So, is speeding the player up an option? Like, is that something you'd be willing to consider?
¿Subir la velocidad de los jugadores es una opción?
Well, it sort of depends on how it was done. Like, we've discussed some things in that area, like before. I'm not necessarily against that, but it would have to be done in a way that didn't compromise the combat and compromise like the like it shouldn't be the case that you, I mean, because this is the issue with this, right? Is that speeding up the player is if you speed up the player to the point where they're once again faster, then always faster than the monsters, then you get back to the like combat doesn't work anymore, like your combat is optional kind of like situation again. So like we would have to find a way to do that wasn't going to.
Si hacemos que los jugadores vayan más rápido que los mobs, tenemos el mismo problema de que el combate ahora no funciona. Estamos discutiendo formas de hacerlo.
I'm not exactly wanting to subject people to like running when they're not doing anything, right? But it's just a question of finding a way to do that that's not going to.
It's hard to say anything specific because like there's a little bit of like the moment we say a specific solution, people might hold us accountable to that in a degree, and
like we haven't tried it yet, so we can't.
We have been talking about it. We do have some options we want to try. We just don't want to talk about them before we try them.
Right.
But
tenemos opciones que en mente. No queremos hablarlas hasta que las probemos porque una vez que las mostremos o que las digamos, la gente va a esperar que eso sea exactamente lo que va a ocurrir.
Many more items in PoE 1 that you can use to streamline the efficiency on reroll. That is still very deficient. Yes, it will come in time, I assure you. It's just a matter of we did higher level uniques this time. Obviously, they're not going to have low level item requirements. Maybe next time there's a more even split. I don't know. We just need to keep going with the uniques and we'll eventually get there. We do have some designs that achieve specifically the low level high movement speed boots. We do have that as a thing that I definitely already have designed. I think it's just waiting on the art and then it's going to go in.
El tema de los únicos para los twinks para levelear, eso es algo que tenemos en cuenta también. Eso va a llegar. Simplemente hay muchísimas más opciones en Path of Exile 1 y vamos a llegar ahí eventualmente.
The twinking situation is not bad right now, right?
It's like not as damage. Bad. It's not as bad. Again, you can kill stuff fast.
It's the movement speed specifically that we're.
And the fact that we don't have movement abilities, like in the same way, like there's only so much speed you get with shield charge. Like if I'm doing like a third or fourth character, I can definitely get enough damage, right? It's rough on my first character,
but you don't at least have to use movement abilities as the solution to this. And I would prefer that wasn't the solution because. then you end up with a kind of like pretty lame sort of gameplay thing going on. Like, there's going to be a better way to improve that without having a build a solution.
We have some things on the cards. We just need to test them out and try them and be able to actually have a good argument as to why they work, why they are good, and we convince ourselves, damn, we should have done this before, or they're bad, and we're like, here's why they're bad, and we can explain what we tried and why it's bad. But yeah, again, we're always a bit
Jonathan no es fan de las habilidades de movimiento. Mark dice que tenemos que testear cosas y llegar a la conclusión de que, ¿por qué no hicimos esto antes? O no, esto definitivamente es malo y esta es la razón.
We'll tell people the moment that we have it, but again, it's not a piece of. It certainly is something that's come up and will come up every single repeat of the league, and so it's not like off our radar by any means.
Okay, that's good. So obviously a bit of a different question, but on console, debuffs have the option to be at the bottom of the screen. Could that be a toggleable option for PC? Just
en consola,
can be rough to like move your eyes.
It wasn't on my radar. We might be able to do something.
We have a full buff UI rework going on at some point soon. It was planned for earlier, where like
en consola los debuffs pueden aparecer abajo en lugar de arriba. Podemos tener eso en PC. Le dicen que están trabajando en un rework de UI de todo.
I mean, it's the whole they can go behind the boss's life bars and all that problem, and hopefully if it's good enough as well, we can port that to PoE 1, because it's a more egregious problem there for sure.
Okay, parece que quieren cambiar el UI. Fantástico, man.
In PoE 1 we have a lot of player agency over how we solve early problems. Like the skill tree has a lot of temporary fixes for a build early on, where if your gear isn't up to scratch, you can get 30 to like strength dex int, you can get leech, you can get resists, even like specific ones like fire, cold, lightning, etc. You can get very easy access to fixing mana and stuff like that. And a lot of things
Path of Exile no tiene muchos fix para tu build. Sobre todo al principio. Puedes sacar reducción de mana, puedes sacar leech, puedes sacar resistencias, puedes sacar stats.
We don't really get enough sockets early on, we don't get enough gear early on, and we
igual con la mesa de crafteo.
Any way at all to really fix this.
En Path of Exile 2,
why is it that you're not getting enough sockets early on?
Well, they're just not dropping. Even if you're checking the vendor, like I'm checking the vendor every time I level up, I'm disenchanting everything. I still don't get enough because the game is very difficult right now. So you try to keep getting gear upgrades. There is not enough loot. There is a lot of people complaining about not enough drops.
I don't get the same experience of not getting enough socketables personally. Like, I would say that probably 80% of the gear I'd be wearing pretty much through the whole campaign would have sockets like in there. So like if that's the case, then like there must be something I'm not understanding about like why that people feeling that way. Because that's just like a totally different experience than what I see.
Zizaran dice que no le alcanza el gear para tener sockets.
I would love
the intention.
Jonathan dice que el 80% de la campaña él tiene full sockets. Y que consigue currency para eso. Cada vez que Jonathan dice algo así, yo lo que quiero es ver un playthrough de Jonathan completo, man. Eso es lo que quiero, man. Porque yo no quiero pensar que me miente, man. O sea, yo literal yo no quiero pensar que me miente. Yo lo que quiero es puedes mostrarme cómo es un playthrough completo tuyo. Capaz el mocho soy yo y los mochos somos nosotros y Jonathan lo haciendo bien. Pero esa no es la, o sea, ya he hecho la campaña múltiples veces. Si consigo con sockets, es maravilloso. Si consigo durante toda la campaña conseguí 2 o 3 artificials, más nada.
That's not a thing that I'm doing. I mean, I might do it like if I've got like a stack of 9 shards and I'm like, okay, I want a socket right now. I might like do that, but generally speaking, that's not what I'm doing. So like, there's clearly some disconnect here, as far as like what the amount of loot that you're getting versus what I'm seeing, I suppose. So like, I guess I just need to understand why. Like, why does it feel so different for different people?
It might have a relatively high swinginess or something that we need to find a way, like adding more. Like I know something that was suggested was adding more artificers orbs to fixed quest rewards through the game to minimize the RNG outcome.
Eso puede ser.
We added those quite late. We didn't end up putting them in the.
So that's something that we could definitely do, which would mean you just get more of them during campaign, and I'd be totally open to that. Like that's totally reasonable.
A second thing I'd like to do soon is explore. sort of unrelated, but is that, well, casters don't have their weapon crafting bench,
and we do need to
we want to add sockets to caster
we
weapons.
have to add sockets to caster weapons. That needs to come as well.
Le van a poner sockets a las
Now,
caster
there is one
weapons.
slight concern that I have seen echoed in a decent bit of feedback, which is that the runes are, which is mitigated with more Artificer's Orbs for sure, but the runes are creating a bit of a sense of making it like the thing with that the PoE 1 sockets created, which is like replacing items becoming slightly harder.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of just making sure we're careful about that as well. But being able to have more Artificer's Orbs and thus socket more gear will mitigate that, so that when you get your upgrade, you're able to add a socket to it.
But I would say that it's definitely the hard-coded drops that would be the thing that, because if it's not happening to everyone, then it is a thing that will that would be better off solving that way.
But yeah, the caster weapons getting rune sockets and obviously runes for them, and adding more deterministic Artificer's Orbs to the campaign is certainly two things on my immediate radar to help at least mitigate some of this.
Durante la campaña van a hacer que te den como recompensa Artificer's Orbs.
I just don't want them to be too much about giving damage, but it might be a lot of the more utility and defensive ones are just on the weak side, and those can certainly come up immediately.
Well, the problem that you have, once again, is that, like, so I sort of mentioned this earlier, but if the tools that you have are too powerful, then the people who know to use them are benefited to a larger degree compared to the people who don't. And what you're doing there is then you end up in a situation where content will, be like, it's just a new player goes into this and it's like, well, I didn't know about this, and then like you get screwed over. And so like things like
No me gusta la forma en la que piensa Jonathan eso, man.
Nodes on the passive tree can be this way, where it's like,
tú deberías ser recompensado por saber más del juego.
You're screwed, right? Like that's the kind of thing.
O sea, que el juego no es así.
And so
¿Cuál es el punto de jugar un juego de este estilo si yo no voy a estar recompensado por saber más cosas?
Lesser runes exist, because if you knew to put
o sea, debería ser
damage
más evidente lo que hay ahí, estoy de acuerdo, no debería ser tan oscuro como en Path of Exile 1, pero no estoy de acuerdo, man.
Compared to anyone who didn't know that. And so it's like you've
got, o sea, las
like,
runas son como, hay un hueco, le puedo poner algo en el hueco, obviamente, es un hueco, ponle algo ahí.
Just with knowledge alone, it's like you're completely like you're completely overpowered compared to other people. So you just have to be like, we just have to be really careful with that stuff.
Well,
it's important. It's also.
Oh, no, you're gone.
It's just important to make sure that the solutions are very front-facing, because that passive tree stuff, in PoE 1, sure, I agreed, and it seems obvious to a bunch of people, but then also there's two problems going on there in the PoE 1, which is it adds to a sense of complexity, because it's like, here are the things you must know before you start playing to have a good time, and I know that's one small piece of that puzzle. Or that problem. And the second thing is, looking at PoE 1 from that crafting bench, is that the crafting bench is in your hideout and not in any town, which I agree is a downside. Ideally, it would be more in your face. And so, like, a lot of people just forget to use it and forget that it exists. And that is a thing where, like, again, if you know, you know, and you have a good time, and if you don't know, you don't know, and you like, suffering. So whatever the solutions end up being, we definitely need to make sure are, like, very front-facing in your face and are like, here's clearly the very intuitive way to solve these problems. So that's just an important piece of like philosophy we need to make sure we maintain.
Una cosa importante es que
can be solved through quests though, right? You can have an NPC early giving one of those like runes and even telling you like, hey, chuck this in your weapon for more damage if you're using a bow.
Surely if the runes are there to solve problems, then ideally we're not telling you exactly which one to use, right? Because it should be dependent on what your problem is. But we do need to make sure that people have got enough Artificer's Orb to make sure they can do that. That's the main thing that I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, but you were talking about the problem that you're rewarded for knowledge, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. I think that is a good thing.
No, you 100% should be rewarded for knowledge. The question is,
dice que debería estar casi en un pueblo o algo para que la gente la pueda ver, a diferencia de Path of Exile 1, de que si no sabes que está en tu hideout, no vas a pasar un mal rato.
Then like that means that like the way it means that the balance has to be like surely like monsters would have to be harder if that was the case. And so it's like, I don't think that can be something that like we don't want to have to make the monsters harder. So therefore like we have to just be a little bit careful about that
there's a fine line there for sure. Right. But yeah, there's some improvements around here to be made, and there's some good takeaways from that anyway, right? Like when the determinism for sure, and I think it's also a matter of like, okay, I think there is a guaranteed rune from Ogham Village. Maybe that's too late. We should be doing that like earlier or having more of them. You know, again, more of that deterministic outcomes, but also maybe knowing that you're going to get that in advance would be helpful. I don't think we quite have that displayed. So it's like you know, some of those like the world map icons where you go and get a specific reward it's not necessarily explaining to the user what they're going to get. And so they might just be like, it's just another one of those. I don't need another tier 4 skill gem, but they don't, that's because maybe they think it's that. So yeah, bit of information improvements and a bit of just like some power adjustments, some more determinism, especially with Artificer's Orbs. I actually 100% agree with that. I think if we hadn't have added that system so late into the development, we would have actually put that more throughout 100% anyway, so we should just do it now. But yeah, well 100% some improvements there.
Another thing I'm curious about then, I asked about the skill tree. Do you feel like the skill tree gives a good, or does a good enough job of doing temporary solutions right now that you can later out gear, or like, is that something you'd be open to looking at?
Well, our core philosophy there was that the gear should give you base stats and the tree should multiply them, which makes the tree implicitly worse at then solving the problem. So the intention there is that, now whether or not, I would say we haven't really rediscussed it since then. I still believe that's a great thing to have.
There aren't the other thing that, just as a side note, is that there aren't runes that give you attributes, right?
Correct.
And so that means that you can't solve attribute requirements with runes, which is something that I brought up a bit ago, but like we didn't have time to look at what the implications of that were.
My sole fear with that is that it means that it is even harder now to replace an item with another item.
That is the concern.
Yeah, it is. That's why like something like
Mark dice que la idea del árbol es que el árbol iba a multiplicar tus stats o tus valores y los ítems te iban a dar valores base. Por lo tanto, el árbol es malo para resolver problemas porque va a ser amplificar lo que ya tienes.
We didn't know anything about the skill tree and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, I was in like Act 2 somewhere, and I hadn't pre-planned my day. I hadn't like looked at the data mines or anything like that. So I was like, okay, let's go look at the skill tree where the resists are, because I'm like 10%, 15% on the different res, so I'll pick up 15 on the skill tree. And there was just that one in like warrior left start, and I was very surprised for that. So like, what's the reason for not having that much resist on the tree?
Because once again, as Mark said, the tree is the theory of it is that the tree enhances what your items are doing, in order to make the But I mean, look, there's something to think about again. Like there might be something to that we should be reconsidering.
Yeah.
Jonathan dice la idea era lo que dijo Mark, pero
ambos for sure.
Lo que entiendo entre líneas es que algo que no les gustó del árbol, y sé que quieren hablarlo de nuevo, pero tanto Jonathan y Mark se nota que no quieren decir nada ahorita, porque decir algo ahorita es como asegurar de que van a hacerlo. Por lo tanto, prefieren simplemente vamos a hablarlo y después traen el resultado, por así decirlo.
Because if you think of like the tree for one on obviously PoE 1, and you combine that with the crafting bench on PoE 1, like the amount of resistances you're getting there, even from the lowest tier crafts and the tree, is enough to certainly be able to solve any problem. So there's a little bit of just like making sure we don't want to make it too trivial. Well,
the other thing as well is that the monsters are balanced, assuming a different amount of resist than they were in PoE 1.
Eso es verdad.
So that like changes things a little bit as well.
Eso es cierto. Eso es lo que dice Jonathan, eso también es cierto. O sea, tú puedes hacer mapas con 50% de resistencias y estás bien.
Okay, well, the expectation is that you should be able to get through.
En Path of Exile no puedes hacer eso. No estás capeado de resistencias, vas a pasar mal.
If you're at 0%, you should be like that should be enough, and then any improvement you have over that is supposed to be just like something that's making your character better. But if the monster life or monster damage is not calibrated correctly, then it won't feel that way to the player. But like that was kind of like balancing around 0 was like another idea that we had to try and make it so that you always knew the amount of resistances you were supposed to have. Like being that like if the number is red, you need more, and if the number is not red, then you have enough. Like that was kind of the theory in order to make it more obvious. Like what people are supposed to do there.
The other thing about the tree that can be a bit tricky here is that when you have that problem, like you probably have that problem immediately where you're like, oh, I'm dying to all this fire damage. I don't have enough fire resistance. The answer can't be like, okay, I need to look at my tree and get some fire resist, because that's too late, right? Like you need to solve this problem more immediately. Right. So having a more immediate solution is ideally what it would be. So ideally there you'd be like, okay, I'm going to swap this item for this item or maybe put this rune in, and now I might have another go and have a good time. Where if the answer is like, okay, there's resistance nodes over here, I just need to get 6 more levels so I can get them to then go and fight the boss. Like, I understand there's a level of like, obviously they're good at forward thinking problem solving, but like when you're like in the moment and you're like, damn, I'm struggling right now. What am I going to do right now? It needs to be a more immediate solution. And that's where the passive tree solves it in one regard, but doesn't solve it in another regard. And it's important that, yes, the runes are there to solve that problem and certain items are there. And sure, it's easy. It is not necessarily incorrect to say that those tools aren't as readily available as they should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think part of it is that we're definitely not dropping enough gear. Like the
Mark dice que la idea es que el árbol sea algo que para resolver problemas que pienses a futuro, mientras que las runas es para resolver algo en el momento. Y sé que el problema que tiene es que no tenemos suficientes runas disponibles, sockets, etc.
You're also just saying the monsters are too powerful. Like it can just be the monsters. Like I don't think that it needs like it. There's an element here of like you might just be conditioned to wearing rares in every slot all the time, which doesn't have to be the case.
Well,
the gear power is entirely.
Jonathan necesita hacer PR. Oh my god, dude.
If you're saying your gear isn't good
enough, entiendo lo que
dice. Porque
he trabajado en suficientes empresas y suficiente burocracia para poder leer entre todas las bullshit. Pero Dios mío, man.
Jonathan necesita hacer PR urgente. One of the things that PoE 2
está ganándose el odio de toda la comunidad con las cosas que está diciendo.
You're not just saturating on rares like halfway through Act 1 anymore. Like you actually do, and what that actually means is that
en Act 1 de Path of Exile tampoco estamos full de raros, man.
In some cases, you're like changing around your gear through the campaign, and it results in way more like gear upgrades as you go through the campaign. Like there's way more often because you'll downgrade to a blue, but then you'll find a regal and you'll upgrade it, and then you'll add some more mods and so on. And like the amount of gear changes that are happening through the campaign is very, very high. And so if we just dropped more gear, then we would lose out on that. And whereas if we lower monster power, then you're improving the we wouldn't need to do that. Once again, that doesn't necessarily say that the gear is in exactly the right place, but what I am saying is that like it isn't just buff items. Like it is a question of player power relative to monster power.
But the thing is, like, we aren't switching out gear a lot, though. I think a lot of us feel like we're like finally finding, let's say, like a glove with 60 life and 15 fire res, and then we end up keeping that all the way until maps because we aren't really finding anything else. We have very little currency.
Gran parte de los items que yo consigo son así.
Reported finding like a large chunk of the majority of their currency in Act 1, where maybe people find as much as like 3 to 10 exalts in Act 1, and then find 0 in Act 2 and 3. So it seems like very, very early heavy.
I can't really explain why that would happen, because like the gear, like the way that loot drops doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the number of magic and rare monsters that exist. And so over time, the amount of loot you get increases through the game just because the number of rare and magic monsters increases. And due to the way the currency drops work in PoE 2, the more of those you get, the more rare currency you'll get, which means that like it'll just feels like you get more currency. So like that isn't a phenomenon that I understand for sure. Like you should be getting more currency as you go through the acts for sure. Like that is as far as I understand.
Several times I've been joking about making new characters to farm currency, and a lot of people like said they agreed. So
thankfully, we can relatively easily, if we need to, pretty much after this, add some logging for that and go and see what's actually happening.
But that is unusual. Like I can't explain why that would be the case.
I concur. There isn't. It shouldn't work that way. It shouldn't be that way. So if that is the case, which isn't necessarily true, but it could be. we're never going to rule out any bug or unintended thing where we can
Zizaran dice que muchas personas han pensado o han quedado como conclusión de que ganas más currency en el primer acto que en el resto de los actos. Entonces, Jonathan y Mary dicen, eso debería ser imposible o no tiene nada que ver porque hay menos monstruos raros y mágicos en el acto 1, por lo tanto consigues menos currency. Pero dice que podemos testearlo, podemos poner a gente a hacer login y que lo testee. Yo también siento eso, ¿eh? O sea, y después que le digas Zizaran.
I would say myself, I got very few regals and stuff to use.
Regals muy pocas. Para mí las regals son considerablemente como 3 veces más raras que las exaltas. Tal vez más de 3 veces.
I'd say through the campaign, I dropped probably 4 regals.
Well, hang on, but we're not talking about dropping only. We're talking about disenchanting too, right?
So, because of crafting being so RNG, I will generally have opted in. I've tried both, obviously, between disenchanting, but I find that I benefit more from gambling than from actually trying to crafting. My experience with crafting is picking up every blue, looking for 1 stat, regaling, and then that missing and the item not being usable.
If you're not disenchanting rares, then you certainly won't get a lot of regals.
Sure, I've tried both.
No, pero, o sea, está bien. Yo regals tal vez he conseguido 5 o 6.
I can't say much
contando
as to that,
lo que desencante. Pero drops tal vez 3.
If that is where the primary source of regals through the campaign would be disenchanting. That isn't to say that gambling isn't better. Maybe it is, but that it does explain that particular one currency item at least.
It's also quite few alchemies and stuff as well.
Una en todo este
playthrough kind of not really intended to be that common anymore because the intended way to go through to rare is more via regaling.
Supongo que tiene sentido.
Alchemies are the kind of oh awesome, I got an alchemy. That's that's the uncommon thing that you do occasionally, not the
Estoy de acuerdo. Mira, yo no tengo problema con eso si las reglas son un poquito más comunes, porque tenemos mucha transmut, muchas augments. Entonces está bien. Pero Alchemy una regla creo que te copia 3 y tal vez 3 más de desencantando. Transmutation y augmentation suficientes.
What this actually is.
Yeah.
And you might find that it's just very sensitive to, there's always just going to be a portion of unlucky players and a portion of lucky players. I definitely know that there's a lot of swinginess, of course, and that can happen. And again,
sí, pero bueno, de todas las veces que lo he hecho me ha pasado
I know you've probably played more than most, so arguably you should have the you should have the most amount of data from a purely anecdotal perspective. So, you probably have the best average going on, the most accurate average, I should say. But that being said, we have the capacity to look into this very quickly, and we can do so probably even today and figure out what's going on and whether or not it meets our expectations. So
the next thing I want to ask you about is the ailment thresholds.
Esta parte quedó simplemente en vamos a analizarlo y tal, pero abiertos a que tal vez hay un problema.
And I would say that feels a little bit overly punishing when we don't have as many solutions or tools, right? Because we have 1 charm slot, and it is quite difficult to get a 2nd or 3rd. And that's competing for freeze immune, stun immune, poison immune, ignite immune, and chaos immune. And bleed. Now, I would say poison, ignite, and bleed from the monsters don't actually do that much right now.
Peligroso, pero
but if it did, this would be a very, very heavily competed for, singular solution to doing anything with that. And as an addendum to the question, I wonder, would you consider letting belts get more implicit charm slots based on item level? So maybe at 50 plus they have 2, and at 81 they get 3.
We probably will increase the number of charm slots. That is something that we kind of were intending to do and never got to yet. But I don't think that the ailment threshold was in the right place before. Effectively ailments didn't exist before we changed that. We needed something that was going to actually cause them to happen. During the campaign before you got frozen 3 times the whole campaign, it kind of was a bit silly.
We didn't actually universally double the stunning. I know you mentioned that just to clear
it was ailments that changed, not stunning.
They stun you more as things get higher level. the expected amount of stun threshold you should have goes up. So it's not, but it's pretty minimal throughout the entire campaign. But what we
Jonathan
also
dice que probablemente van a agregar
the,
más charms, slots.
You gain a bunch of stun threshold when you get light stun, so you have way
Y por
lower
lo tanto,
probability
más
of getting
charms.
stun locked. But then I would also point out, like, some of those charms just suck because it doesn't even mitigate the stun that stunned you. And that is just something that we were like, we initially did, and they were like, oh, we need to change this, and then it just got lost in the weeds. So like, the other thing is changing those, and I know the resistance ones work this way as well. Like those just need to also cancel out the thing that caused it, or mitigate the thing that caused it. And those where some do and some don't, so that needs to change 100%. And then yes, we need more slots. I think we're actually going to support up to 6 slots. That isn't to say that everyone will trivially have 6, but there is UI for it.
6 is only 6 is a thing you might be able to do with uniques and stuff like that. It's not something that you get
but it was certainly our expectation, or intention, I should say, that we give out more slots so that people are running more. One is not what you should be running.
Pero
like,
para llegar a 6 es como que invirtiendo fuertemente en eso.
Probably 3 and like sometimes 4 wouldn't be unreasonable.
Pero para mí los charms.
But it's interesting that even the ailment threshold change we made
no soy fan de los charms,
has not really affected most of the ailments that you just said. Like you just were saying that, like, you know, that bleed, poison, and stuff are not really doing much yet. And it's like, like that wasn't even, like, even halving that number apparently wasn't enough to make those be a thing that you need to care about. Like only Frozen is the one that really kind of changed, I think, and like for the most part that you actually notice. The stun thing is separate. It's not part of the ailment threshold change.
Yeah, I mean, but if they did do a lot of damage, that'd be very overwhelming right now and things we can deal with.
Well, but I mean, yeah, like it's not like we want it to be overwhelming.
It's a bit of a different. It's a bit of a different game,
right?
Like
but
when you get the mod and modifiers and map mods and everything involved.
Sure. But you know, it does need to happen sometimes in order for it to actually be something that's worth mitigating. So now we just need to look at the actual, the charm stuff as well.
El problema es si tienes 2 charms iguales activan los 2, man.
And do you think the implicit will be tied to item level at all? So it'll be something that you don't necessarily have to do a crazy investment or a path on the tree?
I don't know what the answer to that is. I have to think about how we want to introduce that. Like that is one way. I mean, but there might be other ways. I just have to look at that.
The other thing is like charm. There's a level of like reviewing charms in general is just how, you know, aside from how many you have and not just their implicit, like their base value, there's also just like, I'd say a lot of the modifiers on them are just absolutely like nonsense. It's like, oh, recover 4 mana when it procs. It's like, okay, thanks. That's not a useful thing to happen. So there's a bunch of affixes there we just need to make better as well, and we may as well probably do that at the same time, unless of course it makes it take longer, in which we'd rather just get out the number of charms first. So
yeah. In PoE 1 we have masteries. I'm a huge fan of those, especially for temporary solutions. Is that something you're open to bringing back in PoE 2?
I'm not a huge fan of them because they ended up devaluing the notables a lot. Like the notables became really bland when masteries were introduced, and it's like, and it also means that like the where you are on the tree didn't matter as much either, which like kind of wasn't amazing. So I think that we like prefer to have it be a situation where the notables are more interesting, and I do think that in PoE 2
para
the
alguien
notables
que
are
habla
very interesting. Like it's
de una forma
something
muy
that, like,
específica y muy apuntada a data.
good.
Esta opinión que acaba de tener es completamente personal.
I don't love the way that the masteries kind of blandified
no estoy de acuerdo.
the notables.
Yo te dice que no le gustan las maestrías porque deja de importar un poco dónde estás en el árbol y los notables importan menos. Los notables de Path of Exile no importan mucho, man.
But I don't feel like they're directly competing at each other, right? You can still have like really interesting masteries and notables.
Exacto. Aparte que las maestrías son exacto, las maestrías son otra cosa. O sea, ni siquiera las puedo como meter en la misma categoría, en cierta forma.
Many stats that can exist, but like
no, se pueden poner cosas muy cool en las maestrías.
Fundamentally,
quieren ideas y se las doy gratis, man.
Because of the way that, like, you know, due to mod dilution, so like you have to, you know, you have to budget that in some level. Otherwise, you just get a situation where you've got so many effects on your character that like everything, that like nothing, no one thing matters at all. So like that's, you know, just.
I'm a bit more torn about this one personally because I do agree there are downsides, but on the other hand, it's the one that added it to PoE 1, so like I'm a little bit like.
Well, I don't think it was obvious at the time.
Yeah.
What downside that would have. I mean, that was certainly not something that I would be against.
There's also just like the passive tree is like overwhelmingly complicated to people.
Right.
And so having this extra layer on it was probably my biggest thing of like, oh no, we made the thing that scares people the most more scary.
Right.
Because there's this extra layer that they have to, an extra keyword they have to know about. And that was my main thing of like, maybe we should just simplify the thing that is like the scariest thing. Like that was a big argument to me, but there are, there's intermediary grounds there as well. But yeah, there's like downsides to it for sure. Like I agree. There's also maybe a way to make them work. I don't know.
But I mean, what's the goal of it, right? Like if the goal is to give you temporary solutions, then we don't necessarily have to solve it there. We could just solve it in a different place, and then it wouldn't be necessarily something
that is also true.
That's going to give you the downsides that we see that those ones.
A mí me gusta mucho la maestría.
It's also just as a player, it is just very fun. Like I absolutely enjoy it. And it definitely, I can tell you, it does not make me feel like notables are devalued. I was even more exciting because you get it when you get the notable.
It's hard to identify that in the moment because like you don't notice the lack of something, you don't notice the lack of what something could have been in the same way that you notice, like the thing that's in front of you that you're enjoying. You know what I mean? Like it's harder to appreciate the fact that the notables are less cool in PoE 1.
Sure.
Like, because you're not thinking about that. You're thinking, I want the.
I mean, you can at least rest assured that we're going to think about why they were important and what we could do to solve them, whether it be that means or another. The good thing about these is all of the things almost everything you bring up is going to result in some sort of multi-hour discussion between us over the next week. So
that's good.
Which is the huge benefit of these things for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, thank you for doing it. But the next one's something I care a lot about, especially as a hardcore player. Defenses seem very undertuned compared to offense. And just like anecdotally, if the two options, right, if we look at it in a bit of hyperbole, where I get to watch like tankiness be out of hand or offense be out of hand. So like literally somebody walking up to a boss and one-shotting it. Or looking at somebody standing there be immortal, right? I always think like if one should be out of hand, it's more interesting when the defensive one is out of hand. You still get to see the boss abilities and stuff like that. It seems so much easier always, and I think most patches have been like this, where it's always easier to scale offense rather than defense. And I wonder a little bit how you feel about that.
Path of Exile 2 es mucho más fácil escalar el daño que la defensa.
Well,
faltan
you're
defensas,
not wrong,
básicamente lo que dice
often
Zizaran.
the best defense is stacking all of the damage.
Yeah.
I mean, we've suffered from this for a long while. It is ultimately a consequence of just having the game be like, again, talking about the hip firing and things be a bit unregulated with respect to the levels of uniques and builds and stuff going everywhere and hard to think of it all. And like, but it is generally true that we have more offensive. I guess people find damage in general to be more fun as an investment avenue.
That
for
is
sure.
The real thing, is that most people would prefer to invest in offense generally.
I agree with that.
Probably the case.
But then shouldn't defense be even more encouraged then for the people that want to? Because even as a hardcore player, I almost feel like it's the opposite. Like anecdotally, for example, for point one, and full disclosure, I have not been able to get to Arbiter yet, right? We're very early in the league, so I don't know if you made them do less damage. But in point one, other people were doing some testing, and I asked softcore players to try a little bit, and there were people that were getting one-shot by Arbiter moves with 15k life. Some that are like kind of hard. So as a hardcore player, what I felt like then, I was like, well, and since I can't really tank, like there are multiple moves here that I can't tank, not just like one big telegraphed one shot, but there are multiple here that I can't tank. So what I did to prepare instead was I went in with so much damage that I just one shot the boss, which is a little bit deflating for me. I would say Arbiter was one of the least fun bosses, whereas I would way rather go in and be so tanky that I can make a few mistakes, and then end up leaving.
It's quite hard to
Estoy
split the difference between being
la
tanky and being
perspectiva de
immortal.
Zizaran, estoy de acuerdo con ello.
Like surprisingly hard to get that right. And when I say that, it's because you can regenerate life very quickly. And so if you don't die, Like, okay, and the other thing as well is that boss abilities that do those big hits take a long time, right? And like the bosses often can't hit you again immediately afterwards. It's like they'll do their big ability, and it's not like it's going to just immediately follow up with something that's going to chip you down either. So
yeah,
like,
but
if
we
you
can't
fail,
tank them.
no, but what I'm getting towards is that if you don't have something that's going to do a lot of damage at the for those big hits, like we just have to be very careful, because like if like let's say that one of those big hits did only like, you know, a third of your life, you know, something like that. I don't think that then the boss would ever be able to kill you ever, because it would have to effectively be able to do 3 of those, like of those things before you can regenerate them. So what you're really asking for, and well, this is something we discussed a lot in the past, by the way. What you're asking for is for a more attrition-based gameplay style, like a more MMO style like thing.
So yeah.
And what you're really saying then is that you want flasks to do way less regeneration, and you want regeneration to be controlled way more in general, and then have a more attrition-based gameplay style. And that kind of just isn't a PoE way of doing things. Now, like, I mean, that could be a thing we could change to. Like, that would be an option that we would have.
Pero hay bosses que son así.
It would be the
No en el
balance
endgame.
change of the universe
No sé si
to
en el
do something
endgame.
like that. Like, it would be a complete redesign of all the damage and like bosses and like the whole way everything works. Like change to more attrition style would just be like a you know, an apocalyptic level of balance change compared to what we have, for sure.
I mean, I'm not 100% sure I agree with that. And I was going to ask, do you think the goal of a difficult boss should be to kill the player or to deny the player the loot?
I don't understand what that means.
So when you're leaning more towards attrition-based gameplay, right, you're recognizing as a player that you've entered a fight that you're maybe not fully ready for. You're maybe getting the boss to 30%. You're not able to finish it. And you're like, I have to leave. I have to leave this fight. I'm not strong enough. As opposed to punching the player with death, you're already just taking away the loot anyway. There's not an XP loss anyway at the moment.
I mean,
muy buen take el de Zizaran.
I guess we're not thinking in those terms at all. Like, we're just like, but okay, sure, you're talking, okay, like, so okay, so that question, I would say, only makes sense in an attrition-based gameplay context, which is not what we have. So
Sí,
like,
pero,
it kind of means that like,
o sea,
like the boss doing abilities to be able to,
igual está hablando
like,
específicamente del árbitro, okay, pero,
the boss trying to win is, or like, and trying to kill you versus denying you the loot isn't a different circumstance unless there's attrition, which we don't have. So like, you know, it's so what I'm saying is, so what are you not agreeing with then about?
Well, I think you do have attrition-based combat on a lot of bosses, right? Because there are many of the like campaign bosses that don't necessarily have one-shots. Even just on like as a Viper, as an example, right? I was having a like quite long fight because I wasn't particularly powerful at Viper. So I think I had to reset 7 times without it killing me, but 7 times before I was able to actually kill Viper on my build because I was running out of flasks. And you don't have a good way to regen them during the fight.
So I'm not when I'm talking about attrition gameplay, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about attrition in the sense that your life pool is something that goes down over long periods of time rather than something that moves around.
Well, it effectively is through the flask, right?
Well, yes.
I was no longer able to recover.
So yes, to the extent that we have attrition-based gameplay, the attrition is through the flask. You are correct. Like, attrition via flask is what we have. What I'm saying though there.
Jonathan no tiene muy claro esto y está dando un poquito de vueltas.
Fair enough. Like, yeah, the flasks do give you the attrition, and so therefore
the campaign is quite attritioned.
It's just
that
way,
the kind of cap comes off, so to speak, at end game, where like it can be very it's certainly the case with a concept like Leech, that the moment that a boss can't one-shot you at all, which...
Well, okay, like, if you removed all sources of flask charge gain out, like, that you could do in a boss fight, then you could probably reduce the size of the
Zizaran está diciendo, tú quieres...
just to check real quick as well, just because...
Si el boss es muy fuerte para mí, Yo puedo
there's kind of a
decidir
few things
irme,
going
sobre
on.
todo si
Like,
estoy
it
en
is the
hardcore. Es como que,
intention
le queda
that
30% de vida al boss, pero no lo
these
puedo
skills,
terminar
and
porque
which
me voy a morir,
happens
entonces
in
me voy a
everyone
ir.
as
Ya
well,
perdí el
and,
boss de todas
like,
formas.
some people
A
might
diferencia
argue
de que
it's
el boss
some
sea
sort
como
of
que
bad design
lo
or
hago
not.
si no cometo ningún absoluto ningún
kinda like
error,
it.
porque el boss me puede matar de un one
There are
shot
other
como
skills
de
that are
10
more
maneras
like
distintas. Entonces, no me voy a hacer tanque, lo que voy a hacer
your
es ser full
personal
daño.
agility or
Y
dexterity
Jonathan dice que
based, and
no
you have
tenemos
to
un
avoid
juego
them,
que
and
sea
that's
de
like, you
attrition,
know,
de...
stand in the elder donuts
Attrition,
and
¿cuál
the,
sería attrition
you
en
know, the
español?
dances and the like move into the lanes and the, you know, bullet hells-esque things where it's like that's not really your character as much. Like, are you thinking
desgaste.
those are fine, or are those
No tienen
whether or
un
not
juego
they're
de
exactly
desgaste.
tuned in this context?
Porque si hacemos un juego
like,
de
in terms of
desgaste sería como
timing,
algo como tipo
but are you
MMO.
okay with the idea that those kill you and you don't get to make like whether or not
Y
they
Zizaran
could
dice,
be
no,
more
pero en la
lenient
campaña tenemos
is
por
a
lo menos
different
así. ¿Se
question,
acuerdan de la
but,
pelea
like,
con el coloso
would
que
you, are you
duró como
okay with those
10
killing
minutos?
you and kind of your defenses
Era, no
don't
tenía
really
flash,
matter?
no tenía mana, no tenía nada. Te están
Like,
pegando
are
con
those the
hits
problem?
básicos
Is
hasta que
what
se
I'm
muriera.
just trying to understand exactly what skills are a problem.
Yeah, so for the Arbiter, I feel like there are multiple, right? You have the corridor move. That was pretty much always a one shot, right? And sometimes, obviously, like you were saying, that wasn't like the main topic, but they can spawn almost too far away. I remember seeing a clip of like Quinn running slightly in the wrong direction, and then he sees the corridors the other way, and he's like, "Oh, it's over for me." You have the Arbiter move where he does like the fake out meteor, where he starts like firing the beam into it and stuff. I guess the way, like, as a
Ese
player,
movimiento
I
es
would
cool,
want
o sea,
defense
es
to be
hijo
is
de
the
puta,
more
pero es
I
cool.
invest into defense, the larger my room for error should be, which is where I'm feeling there's a big disjoint now, right? Where it just isn't, and then I'm entirely incentivized to go full offense because I'm still having enough defense that those mid-range hits and small hits, they're still not one-shotting me. So all I need to be able to do is tank them, and then I just don't have an option for huge one-shots at all.
Okay, so yeah, I understand the point of view from that one. The main thing is just we're going to have to be really careful with the balance to make sure that it isn't now just like, you know, 20% of investment of the way there. Now you don't get one shot by them, so you just hold down, you know, whatever button on the boss or whatever, and now you're leeching permanently and you're fine. That's the concern. So like, if it is a like universal, okay, like for example, would it be okay that, I mean, look, the corridor, let's use that as the example. So the corridor obviously has some like, okay, it's too hard to get, we need to probably improve the way the lanes spawn such that you don't
podría
get into
ser
that
que hace
situation where
mucho
like,
damage over time en lugar de hacer el daño de golpe. Ya está. Entonces, si fallas por medio segundo, no te mueres.
There is the thing where, like, okay, for example, if like life regen wasn't regulated, like, do you really think any player in the game, like, this is, I'm not saying this is wrong or right, should just be able to AFK in that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so definitely I prefer that over watching people one-shot bosses. 100%. With enough investment.
Well, no, we won't disagree, but just like, I'm just curious, do you actually think it should be okay or able to?
Yeah, I'm not entirely
Tienes 7 días para considerar lo que dijiste.
one shot, like failing the memory game.
Es una pelatudez de grado máximo.
I'm not inherently against that, but I do think the current ones are a little bit like too fast to be those one shots.
Yeah,
sí, no.
I agree.
No, estoy muy feliz con esto, por eso no le di perma.
Here, which I'm interested in. One is mechanics feeling fair, which there are things here that are unfair, and that is bad, and they need changing. And I will get that adjusted today. And I'll get that on live as soon as I can, which might even also be today. The other thing would be that there the bigger thing, which is that investing in defense is not allowing you to mitigate it. It's like, so different from the corridor skill. There's just like whether or not investing in defense enough, it gives you enough defense against things in general, against the bosses, which maybe isn't the case. It might be that yes, you investing in defense needs to be more advantageous right now for sure. And like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing more, and I've spoken about this before in the past, there's nothing more demoralizing than putting, you know, hundreds of hours into a boss and then it's just like deleted. And it's like, oh, great. That was.
But it's also demoralizing to just watch someone sit there and face tank it and just attack it with no, like, having to not even having to move. Like that's also
well, especially without the gear.
Like it's kind of it's almost a bit ridiculous to discuss like which of these two horrible outcomes is better. Like you know like surely the actual answer is like neither of them should be happening.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's just that it's pretty rare that we've seen defense be the really OP one. That's all, right? Like we very often see offense.
Maybe it is, but like I think that's probably also a lot around the fact that people like building glass cannons.
Sí, pero
like
no.
That is a thing people just like doing. And so like the amount of incentivization and so then there's the issue of like
Jonathan se la pasa citando data y después dice, es que la gente piensa así. Dice, pero es que no tienes alternativa en Path of Exile 2, man. No puedo hacerme tanque, porque no hay forma de hacerme tanque en Path of Exile 2 actualmente contra esos bosses.
Like, I don't think getting 80% of the way to immortality is actually enough even for people to still not want to build glass cannons. And so you kind of got like that issue of like, it's just really, really hard to get that balance right.
Y aparte que es un playstyle distinto, man.
So the
Path of Exile 1 cambió con el tiempo.
And that isn't to say that we won't try, but I'm just saying that like, it is people... There just tends to be an erring on the side of offense for that reason, and I don't think either immortality or insta-killing bosses is right. So, like, you know, the people probably concentrate on the damage more.
Yeah, especially, I mean, we have a bigger problem, especially with just in general, just thinking about it, like, damage also now resulting in crowd control amplifies the problem even further.
Yeah.
Because that having the boss be heavy stunned and or frozen or whatever, like majority of the fight is just even more of a reason to just go ballistic on damage. Yeah, there are problems here 100%. I'm just thinking of random other things that
I have other questions about defense as well. So armor break, I would say like effectively disables armor, right? As a defense for hardcore. It's sort of like when it comes around, it kind of like shuts down your main form of defense. You're feeling like very tanky if you do invest into armor. Well, ideally, I do still armor needs a buff. But I guess the problem I have with armor break and fizz overwhelm in PoE 1 is that it's just so crazy to me to have something effectively shut down your defense from time to time.
Claro, o sea, respondo rápido lo que dijeron. O sea, are you happy with armor break? Si inviertes bastante, te sientes tanque. Si inviertes un poquito, no realmente.
Well, in PoE 2 context, I am not happy with the current state of monster armor break. No, that is also on my change today list. So... I need to... There's a few things. It was meant to be that they're breaking flat amounts of armor, and that isn't... So if the more you stack, the less significant the armor break becomes from the enemy. I suspect there might be some sources of percentage based in there, which are just like... It disincentivizes... I mean, it just means that the more you have, the more you're relying on armor, the more punished it's going to be. So I just need to do a quick audit. There's not that many sources, thankfully, so it won't take long, and I just need to make sure that it's
Mark dice que probablemente lo que está pasando con los mobs que hacen armor break es que hay un modificador porcentual ahí que no debería estar. Porque debería ser que te quiten una cantidad plana. Entonces, si tienes mucha armadura, no va a hacer realmente una gran diferencia. Pero aquí, si tienes algo porcentual, va a ser al revés. Si tienes más armadura, más duro te van a...
we go back
a joder, por así decirlo.
Get the community team to go back through this afterwards and make sure I don't forget about all these things. But no, that one I already have. There's that and the speed and a bunch of these other, and arbiter, and there's a whole bunch of stuff here.
Yeah, we've gone over a lot already. Do you think in the short term we could see just like a straight up number buff to armor while you're trying to work out a long-term solution?
Oh, no, but I'm not talking about a long-term solution for the armor break thing. I'm talking about it'll be solved.
No, I know, but like that's what I mean for armor too.
I see what you're saying. Sorry. Misunderstood. Yeah, sure.
Está pidiendo algo
in order to be able to immediately say that.
In order to change armor, we'd need to be able to understand why it's bad. And I don't think just changing the number right now is right for that.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, I don't think we've fully understood the issue there.
We did a few things. Like, there was some overwhelm on some bosses, and we removed it. And there was, there were too many skills converting too much into element, and I think we pushed back a lot of that. So like, it obviously makes the armor more effective against those abilities, and like, there's a lot more of that we probably need to reevaluate as well, just across the board.
Yeah.
But that stuff's really fast to change. As for just a global number shift...
But that's an example right there of why just changing the number wouldn't have even helped, right? Like, if the problem is elemental damage, then making armor stronger wouldn't have done anything for that. So, like, it's so important to understand the reason before we just make changes.
Obviously, the danger there by moving more Fizz is it then makes it worse for non-armor builds as well, but that increases the power of armor differential to the others, and so there's you've got to be careful with that. But well, maybe
because
maybe there's something we can do more imminently.
Anecdotally, I would definitely love more access to different forms of defense, and I know that is definitely an EA problem where just not everything is in yet. But just to like anecdotally run you through my experience, I am a Smith of Kitava, so I have like the shared res and the shared max res. So I'm 89, 90, 90. And for a long time I was like 85, 86, 87. So very high alley res.
Mis afectaba,
Zizaran. Which means yes, currently moving more into Fizz is probably going to be to your detriment.
Yeah, sure. But even with that, and a Cloak of Flames, and I can't remember the name, Hollow something, but there's the unique helmet with like 15% Fizz reduction. Even with all of that mitigation, I was like, at the start of today's stream, I was very rough until I got my 4th lab. That I was able to like improve it a little bit, but it felt a little bit weird to me as a player that I've like my entire ascendancy was defense based. I picked up every defense I could on the tree, and I was trying so hard to get really good gear too, and it was very rough on defense.
I mean, what I immediately probably will do after is I'm just going to grab your character, put it locally, and then just kind of have a look at that. It's just so I can get a better exact understanding. But like, sure.
I can give you a snapshot before I because now with regen it has been.
We have it all. Don't worry.
Perfect.
We can take anyone's character from live and just play with it. It's not a.
Perfect.
Zizaran dijo que
the region
puedo
did make a big
snapshot de mi
difference,
personaje.
but
De
I'm still
hecho,
seeing,
tenemos todo, no te
a lot of
preocupes.
issues there. Another thing that
We have you.
has been brought up a lot, and I thought was a really good point, was we see chaos damage very early in PoE 2. In PoE 1, it was like generally something we'd see a lot later. Would you be open to considering something like the Chaos Soul Core being a rune instead, something that we can like get early? It's definitely a big part of what makes Viper so scary. Is it's almost impossible to get Chaos Res early on. But yeah.
Igual Viper, siento que dentro de todo es una pelea que si la aprendes a hacer bien.
Sort of more of a hardcore related concern, because in standard you wouldn't like it's just balanced to be okay, but in hardcore where you're wanting to definitely not die, it's like a different concern. And I don't think we would have thought about it in that way previously.
It is sort of a medium core
chaos
concern, because like if you can't get past the boss, you are just stuck there.
Oh sure, but like I mean the damage, like it's balanced assuming 0 chaos resist, right? So like
Viper's hard.
It is hard. It is a hard fight. That's just a side note that's separate. But like in terms of just the fact that it's chaos damage, I don't think
la
this is
Viper
relevant in
particularmente
standard play,
me gusta
because,
como
like,
está. Porque es una pelea difícil, pero no se siente
What does she do that's
injusta.
chaos? Obviously the big purple meteor storm that
Yeah.
I want to make some changes to, because it just creates too much mess on the ground. It's a little bit lacking clarity or that fairness problem. And then
the
how many
spare
of us
things,
skills?
right? I'm assuming.
So the way it works is, aside from poison itself dealing chaos damage, the only other things that are chaos damage are anything that is purple.
Yeah.
Right.
So all of her green stabs and slashes, none of that is chaos, and none of it should
it's
be
physical.
chaos.
It's physical hits, and then the poison. If it poisons you, then it is chaos damage. But because the poison damage is based on the hit, your armor effectively mitigates the chaos damage because it reduced the hit size.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, the meteor thing is a problem, but it's like more of a fairness problem, because ideally you should be able to dodge that pretty reliably every time. Right now, it's a bit of a mess.
It is hard to dodge that.
Yes, but aside from that, it would only be the poison, of which, yes, your other defenses would, armor in particular and evasion would mitigate.
Right.
But yes, I do. It is the case, by the way, that if a thing like any snake spitter that's spitting at you with some green poison thing, that aside from the poison debuff, which I believe you said kind of wasn't that dangerous earlier in general, and maybe there are certain cases where it is.
It's definitely dangerous if you're playing an evasion character. Like that poison feels lethal. And that's once again because the armor didn't.
The hit is never chaos damage, just to be clear.
Which
in PoE 1 it is. It's like half chaos, half fizz.
Yeah. No, I did not know that. I fully thought the spears from the side, which a lot of people say is the most dangerous attack. I thought that was chaos. because it's very heavy.
Just
hit.
fizz.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's probably just more of a Viper is too hard problem.
La única cosa en la campaña que hace daño caos son las cosas que sean púrpuras.
She's very hard. I wanted to ask you a little bit about pushing. As a player,
son cosas púrpuras.
I experienced that
Todo lo que
sometimes,
sea verde
as,
es porque te les hace poison, pero el daño es físico.
to me, if I'm being frank. Is there an option to have more source of push resistance? Something, for example, like the more strength the character has, or wearing heavy armor. It does seem a little silly to a lot of people that like people maybe have 300, 500 strength, or they're wearing like full plate, but like yeah, a lot of monsters are just pushing you around very easily.
Suena como algo cool que deberían poner. Mientras más pesado sea el
It
personaje,
does
más
currently
difícil.
exist as a concept of mitigating it, because it was meant to be more of a physical thing of, well, there's two things. There's like monsters pushing you because you literally cannot occupy the same space as them.
So here are we talking right now about monster charge abilities, or are we talking about like a sword, a sword swing?
The number one thing that has been noticeable for me is that like little, I think it's called an antlion maybe or something. It's like the little like yellow beast that like rolls on you. That still does take you for a ride.
Okay, sure. Well, in that case, that's probably just a matter of fixing that particular thing.
Igual no sé, ese particular, si es nada más eso, está bien. De vez en cuando te sucede y es gracioso.
We just need to look at
aún si muere, me parece que es
gracioso.
gracioso.
And just fix them individually.
There are certain things I wanted to do, like I wanted it to be, and there were technical limitations here that we probably need to reevaluate, but I wanted it to be when you were blocking or parrying and you got hit, you got knocked less back because you technically did deflect them.
Right.
In the parry case in particular, and
in some cases there's just push direction, like maybe the antlions are not pushing you side with that thing.
The charges and things taking you a ride has been like honestly the bane of my year.
That's just that's more of a just specific setup of specific monsters and stuff like that. Like, did we fix what's his name, the lumberjack guy?
In theory, but it seems to regress.
Sometimes.
It seems to just break every week.
I don't think this is a like balance question. I think it's just a technical like we just need to fix some places and.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wonder.
There is also some desync we need to fix because
there's also that
annoying.
Yeah. Is pushing something you would consider temporarily removing until you have fixed the issue?
Not at all. No. It will make the game feel like dog shit if we do that. Like there's just lots of things that you need to have. You need to have some pushing in order to make work. Like I think it's more just specific monsters.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm not 100% sure I agree with that, but we'll move on.
That's because you haven't seen it without it. Like yeah.
That's fair. That's true.
If we turn off all sources of pushing, it would just be it would be a disaster.
Right.
Yeah.
Probablemente tiene razón, porque no he visto Path of Exile 2 sin push, pero he visto otros juegos sin push y se siente raro.
And stuff. And I wanted to bring up the point that a lot of players are using a large amount of their gold on gambling, because a lot of people are falling behind or feeling behind on gear. So I wonder if you would consider further lowering costs and even like reopen the conversation on ascendancy respec during early access, especially since you've been talking about that you are going to be buffing things. So let's say somebody is like, oh wow, Flame Blast looks really cool. I would love to be able to try that, but maybe redoing the entire campaign again, which could be over 20 hours for a lot of people, feels very prohibitive.
Okay. Let's see it.
I do find it to be maybe not. I do find it to be very fucking cheap right now. Is the thing.
Exactly. I can't say personally I've run into that as a problem. Like, I'll respec my character all the time. I don't even think twice about it. Like, it's not been a concern really.
It depends how much you gamble or not.
It probably does.
At that point, yeah, but even like I'm saying, even if you're just like early, so I don't think it takes that long to actually do a pretty substantial.
I have to admit that I haven't been gambling in my playthroughs really. Like I was like probably about 6 months ago. I was doing that all the time, and I just haven't really been doing it recently.
When we did the like gold model and respec costs, we had assumptions of like here's how much people will spend on vendors, and here's how much, and there's probably look, those assumptions assume a perfect world of that person exactly doing that thing, and so yes, if anyone was to stray from that assumption, then I'm not going to be able to afford one thing over the other.
De que el respect es muy caro.
What I'm actually hearing right now, by the way,
Yo cada vez que quise cambiar, cambié y no me quedé sin oro, o sea.
be I need to do some disenchantless runs because apparently I'm not testing something that players are actually doing. Like my runs are entirely like I disenchant every rare on my runs generally, and so if that's a different behavior, then I need to test that and see what the experience is like.
Lo que me gustaría que si pudieras cambiarse la
the whole like
ascendencia.
there's not enough currency thing, there's not
Es
like,
carísima.
stuff like that, and like and if you're telling me that you're like selling your rares and buying gambling all the time,
Pero cuando vuelva yo no tengo para participar.
Respecs, it's like, well, this is just like a materially different playstyle that I'm not currently testing myself.
Right.
So like I think that's what I need to do to see what's going on with that.
And with the last point I made, would you, especially with the fact that there are going to be buffs coming during this, would you
I don't think that anything changes between early access and not early access regard, by the way. Like, I think that if the argument is that it should, like, I think the argument is the same regardless of whether it's early access. Like, I don't think the early access is a part of this decision regardless. It's just, what is the price supposed to be? We should get it correctly to that.
Well,
price.
sure, but I'm talking about ascendancy respec was what I wanted to.
Yeah, otherwise it depends a little bit on the severity of the change. But like...
Supongo que es eso, ¿verdad? Yo siempre que cambio cosas, cambio...
It depends partly also on just how much we change.
5 o 6 puntos máximo.
Without knowing the
no sé si me pasé de eso siquiera.
How big those changes
de resto
are,
es un punto aquí, 2 puntos acá,
get in there and actually do them
cambiar un
first and then
atributo.
make that decision, really.
¿Bastante bien el tema del respect? Sí.
Like, there are certainly options there. It is important to me to make sure that I understand exactly where I sit on the ascendancy class respec thing, because the moment that's turned on, it ain't going back. So that is blocked by me, and I will take whatever is necessary on that one. I understand it.
Well,
Mark es la razón por la que tenemos respect de ascendencia.
I will have a solution. Sure.
Do you feel like it is absolutely necessary to have those both be permanent choices? Because you already do have the character class itself be a permanent choice, right?
Oh no, and I'm like, I do understand. Do be clear. I am on the fence about this. Like, I can't say that. Like, I'm like, oh, I can't believe PoE 1 has ascendancy class respecing. Like, I'm all for that as well. It's just I'm also for the more permanent decision. I'm just like, I need to find the variable that makes me be able to, or the articulation to be able to go one way or the other. And it's very easy to just fold on that. Like, very easy. It'd be very easy to just be like, we're going to change it right now. But it's not, when you have the things that you can't come back from, like, you definitely want to be certain to some degree. There are some other staff that share the same sentiment as me, and I might just go and have a bigger discussion and actually figure that out. And like, it is true, it's not really fair to make people have to wait for that decision on my behalf. I kind of was like, look, by release, post early access, you will have that decision one way or the other, and that will be the way it is. But yeah, fair enough. If the argument is like, if it's going to come up every single time, which is fair, people care about it, then I probably need to press the decision sooner than later. So I'll just get that answer sooner and not
Mark dice que va a tener una discusión al respecto y va a tener respuesta.
It's the answer you want, but if it isn't, well,
va a tener la respuesta lo más
fair.
rápido posible de hacer respect de ascendencia o no.
I think I was curious about, like, so you went with the decision to keep that energy shield does not get bled, which is sort of like giving monsters a form to be immune, right? Like, it feels very similar to like a monster.
I don't think that we've actually come to a decision on this really. Like, there wasn't like I think after the last time this was discussed, we never actually went back and talked about it. So I wouldn't say we've decided that. It's more just that it just went in like that because we didn't get another chance to talk about it. So I don't know that we have a real answer as to what we want to do with that yet.
Okay.
Like, we probably will revisit that.
I personally am just all for changing it, to be honest.
Okay, well, sure. Then I mean, I have no objection to that.
We made the decision a while back. Like, I don't see why it can't.
I did want to bring up, if you do make it like that on players too, remember to put bleed immune on CI.
Yeah. We will definitely change CI.
Ooh.
But it is a thing that the players are now going to have to deal with who aren't CI, just as a a note as a thing that will happen.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that bleed is exactly breaking the bank right now, is it? Or it was for a while. There was a period there where like bleed was just brutal. Like, what changed to make that not the case? Like, I'm talking pre-release. Like, could you remember when the freaking like prowlers and G14 bled you?
We had bleed on a lot more things, and then there was some crazy damage multipliers on it. some that I can't remember why they were, but I mean, again, pre-release numbers, things.
Cool.
Which was also unfun, by the way.
Yeah, the reason I removed it. I'm just saying, like, I don't remember what happened.
I have a question about night prolif, specifically with the monsters needing to stand still for, or like needing to be near the source for 2
Pero tiene que pensarlo.
To be able to proliferate.
It probably needs to be buffed.
It's on the today list.
Okay.
It was actually on my yesterday list, and I didn't quite get to it, so
Cool.
it sucks.
I know we've had a lot of heavy questions, but I have a bit of a lighter question for myself. Like, how are you feeling about the current like Blessed Orb and Divine Orb being bundled together?
I don't have a problem with it.
Que la Divine Orb y la Blessed Orb estén
I don't
juntas.
have a feeling one way or the other, really. It's just how do you feel about it?
I definitely like. I don't know if this is just a PoE 1 player thing, but I definitely feel like it's missing. Because like I would never divine an item, like, because the divine it's a big investment, right? Like we use it a lot on like uniques or like when a main weapon is like in need of it. But
like, are you saying that you believe that this is reducing the desire to actually use divines?
It's just that I would never use it for just an implicit on an item, so it just makes an item feel like pretty much permanently worse than what it should be, I guess, is like my personal
Yo creo que deberían haber blessed también. Por el tiempo dije como que tal vez no está mal que sea más pesado esto, pero la realidad es que
partly also just because the
fuera de las
ranges
tormentas no hay ningún
power
caso
of
en
an
que tú
implicit is
quieras
just too weak as well.
modificar un
Yeah,
implícito.
potentially.
They're not exactly impactful in most regards. Some are good. Some are very good.
I can't say this is something we've really
Siento que
thought
si quieren
about.
hacerlo así, pueden hacer de que tenga
It's just a thing that
un
kinda
techo
happened, and then,
mayor,
like,
el implícito, para que sea como que, uy, si conseguí un suffering con 40% de cold resistance, el implícito, that's pretty good. Pero sabes que el mínimo es 20, que es el mismo de ahorita. Sería interesante.
The next thing is about movement speed. In PoE 1, we have a lot more things like Whirling Blades, Frostblink, etc. And in PoE 1, I feel like it's a bit more viable to completely forego movement speed on boots and go for like triple energy shield. But obviously, movement abilities aren't in the same spot in PoE 2. Is there ever a world where you either like think about like removing the hidden movement reductions on shield and armor, give like a implicit movement speed to boots or something like that, so they scale a little bit with like the higher bases?
Esa me gusta.
Well, I mean, are you just saying here just make movement speed on the player faster?
So,
Yes.
for example, like one idea that I saw was if you let's say that some bases have 5, 10, and 15 movement speed, so like that the higher bases are slightly better, and maybe even like scale less, right? So that some of your movement speed is guaranteed, or make it like a lot easier to roll movement speed, like increase the weight that it can roll.
Well, I don't necessarily think it's bad to have a base type where you've got a mod that, that's somewhat mandatory. Like, that's okay. But it sounds like but if you're,
well, as a player, it just
if honestly, because I mean the thing is, in PoE 1, are there really people going around? Like, surely it isn't common that people don't have movement speed on their boots in PoE 1. I guess it's technically viable if you just.
No, actualmente sí es bastante común.
Quite a lot of like triple energy shield boots and stuff.
Right.
Especially different in PoE 1 because we have the
specialized
influence things.
Right.
Again, seasoned players, not like
right.
Yeah, not new players, sure.
Random.
But it is an option, and it isn't really in PoE 2. Like, movement speed is a lot more
Sí,
mandatory.
aparte de que es distinto, porque la velocidad de movimiento se puede reemplazar por skills de movimiento.
I don't know. To me, like, I mean, sure, I do
Así que,
disagree with the fact that there can be scenarios in PoE 1 where that's not
si
the
no
case,
va a tener
but
que
I
los
would
movimientos
still say
deberíamos
basically
tener que sea una
mandatory
forma de
there
tener
for
más
them,
velocidad de
like,
movimiento.
for
Digo que
most
sea
of your
gratis,
PoE playing career,
pero que haya
I would
alguna
say
forma.
that you're going to be wanting to get movement speed on your boots,
I would even argue like the single best boot in PoE 1, which is the Ralakesh and Patience, they don't have movement speed on them. And like they're still considered like pretty much the best boot.
Right.
True.
But I mean,
esa fue muy buena decisión,
back to the question of like, you want to move faster?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. It is.
Sure. So I mean, I guess that would be so really it just goes back to that.
Move faster implicitly and less dependency on the mod, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, whether or not it's implicit or based on the mod or anything, it's just I want to move faster, right? Like it feels like that's really the core.
Which comes back to the we need to have those discussions and
right.
Yeah.
It's similar.
O sea, no me molestaría que
PoE2 is
sí me molesta igual, pero
the implicits of
la
uniques,
campaña
especially
no
things
sea
like
tanto,
life
pero
sprig,
en el
will
endgame yo pueda
scale
moverme más rápido.
into the endgame. Where, like, if I find a life sprig on my level 80 character now, it's never going to be usable early game. But the explicits on life sprig, and a lot of other caster uniques and things like that, they don't scale either. So have you explored the idea of the actual explicit scaling or the implicit not scaling so that you can find these like twink leveling uniques? Like, what are your thoughts around the uniques there?
I don't think we would want uniques to have the explicit scale like that. That's kind of not what uniques are about. So that is not a particular solution.
The bigger questions about whether or not the implicit, the skill should or shouldn't level up with the item.
Well,
I mean, it currently does, right?
It does.
Yeah, it does. But something that could be interesting is that if you find a life sprig on a level 80 character, it can scale up to that level. So it would scale with your character. That would make it feel really good as a leveling item, for example. That you can use it at level 1, you hit level 3.
I really don't
No le
like
gustó
that
para
kind of
nada
thing,
eso.
the whole like item that just scales with your character. Like, I don't think that we want to move in a direction where you'll have less time to
Razones para
put items on
cambiarte.
your character as you level up. Like, that doesn't feel like the right direction to me.
But there's also more whether, and there's a second part to that, which is whether or not life sprig should even have high level requirements ever. Which
Exacto.
is a thing that's come up a bit.
That's
more,
a separate question. That that's come up. I'm kind of not quite sure about that one at the moment.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be more discussion.
I mean, so one thing that was proposed and as a potential solution to this is that just the like. I feel like maybe you didn't like this. I can't remember who didn't like this. Someone didn't like this. Because I proposed that we make it so that the implicit skill on uniques has like a cap level, but then that does level up as you go through the game. Like it's not that it levels up. It's that like it is capped to the level of where you are.
Yeah.
So that way, even if you get a level 80 life sprig, you can still equip it at low levels, and then and then that will go with you effectively. And somehow I see that as different from like your items changing as you level up. That to me, that's not quite the same thing.
Pero no es lo
So
mismo.
like that would potentially be an
Tienes
option.
razón.
I don't remember why we did. There was some reason why we didn't do that, but like it might still be on the cards.
That's fair.
Wait, so you're saying you're saying if you find it at level 80?
I'm saying if you find it at level
let's say
80. 16 skill, but you can still equip it. It doesn't change the level requirement, but then the skill gets down leveled to the maximum that it can be for the.
Oh sure,
Yeah,
I thought that's what he's proposed just a second ago, but
No, he's talking about the explicit scaling.
no, there's a second thing there.
The second one was that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Maybe I misunderstood then. Okay, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
In that case, then sure. Like,
I mean, I would personally prefer.
Están
to just
todos
be
de
like,
acuerdo,
you
pero
can
se
drop a low
confundieron
level
estando de
life sprig
acuerdo.
and that's you use a low
yeah,
level
but I
life
don't love
sprig.
that either.
Si
honestly.
cae un ítem que sea de leveleo y cae un level
There's a
alto,
part of me that also kind of
el
likes the
implícito es de
idea that
nivel
there's
alto y
some
no lo
uniques
puedes
that
usar de
would be
nivel
more
bajo.
valuable to
Lo
find
que van a
at
hacer
lower
es que
levels, which I thought
si es un
was
ítem de
interesting.
leveleo, ese
But I
implícito
don't know
va a
whether
ser de
players
nivel
actually like
bajo.
that or not, so
Por lo
that's just kind of
tanto,
like a
lo vas a
random-
poder usar para el leveleo, porque es un
but I
ítem
don't
de
hate
leveleo.
Yeah.
What you
Yeah, I
propose.
was just curious, because we do find them a lot. Another question is about the minion resurrect timer. It keeps resetting like the entire timer every time a monster dies. And that can feel very frustrating. So I wondered, how do you feel about that the entire timer resets?
Well, if you don't have that, it feels a lot more frustrating. Let me tell you. Like that was how it was until we changed it, and like it was so bad. Because what happens is that like the monsters just, that your minions just die one at a time, and then they can never really accomplish anything, and it's just like trust me, that was a buff, that change. Like that was a massive improvement. So yeah, like until you experience it the other way, you will understand if you play it the other way. It's
There
really
might
bad.
be an intermediary there. I want to explore some options.
Well, it's
For
also-
example, like, instead of resetting the entire timer, it adds to the timer based on like the cost of the minion or something like that. We might be able to do something like that. So
But
it
I don't
doesn't-
know. But that's not going to fix the fundamental issue, which is that minions work best when there's lots of minions. And so the issue that we had is that you just get into a situation where they just trickle in and die one at a time.
No
and
matter what, they have to revive all at the same time.
that has to happen. Yes.
I'm just saying it could be that like, okay, let's say
Oh, I
everyone's
see what you're
dead but
saying.
one.
Right. So it doesn't. It increases a bit, but not as much.
And
Okay,
so
I
instead of
understand.
like, all about to
Sure.
revive except for
Some
one.
bullshit
he
de
died.
minions.
That's
I don't care,
actually is
dude.
viable, and that
Okay.
maybe is a change we could make.
And like, would you ever be open to adding a keystone that changes the behavior?
Ooh.
I was actually thinking about that earlier today, and I mostly, like the troll in me was like, oh, we should do this just so the players can see how bad it is.
Yeah.
but yeah, that was probably a negative thought I shouldn't be having.
No, that's fair. I mean, I think a lot of people would like to see it.
Sure.
Pero deberían hacerlo, o sea, puede haber hasta un build que tenga una razón para que los minions mueran y revivan uno a la vez.
Convocation, is that something on the table? It's like maybe a spirit skill or something?
Convocation no le gusta para nada, Mark.
That's fair.
I don't love it.
Y a Jonathan tampoco.
I'm kind of like, I could see a world where reservation cooldown, or you have to earn it, or something like that. If
to go in, it would have to be different enough that players probably wouldn't see it as convocation anymore. Like, I suspect that's kind of the reality. Like,
okay. Dice que si convocation va a existir, tiene que ser algo completamente muy distinto a como es en Path of Exile.
You know, like
that being said, it might still just be better, and there might be some room for it.
I don't love it.
Yeah.
Well,
pero a Jonathan no le gusta. Y Mark dice que tenemos que cambiarla bastante.
Okay. When it comes to map completion, obviously there's been some changes this patch.
Oh, here we go.
But one thing that easily feels the worst is when there is one monster just like really far away, and the checkpoint system doesn't really cut it there. Would you consider making the completion of a map be like 90% of the rares instead of 100? Because the bad feeling is very often tied to just one monster, the other side of the map, and I have to like do
y debo admitir que si me queda un mob, yo puedo decidir salir y aún así me voy a sentir mal. Porque quiero matar al mob.
I don't know that that's the answer, but I understand the issue. Like, we straight up discussed last night that like just having the minimap icons on. There was a discussion of doing icons on all the time, right? Because you're not gonna miss the monsters if you see them. The
main reason for that is like the current way it works is it's like when 200 remaining they appear, and on some maps that's like you kill 3 packs and they appear, and other maps it's like you got to clear 80% of it before they appear, and honestly that's kind of weird and bad anyway.
Yeah. It's just that we kind of want to, like, the main thing we're worried about with that change is the whole you just play on the minimap, like you're not even looking into the game.
But I think that fear...
I'm very in favor of that.
Well,
I love that change.
Like, do we just turn off...
literally just showing from the start. Like, I love that initially, for sure, at least for me.
Okay. So I thought you said you loved the idea of not looking at the game and only playing off the minimap.
I kind of do that anyway.
One of the like when we were trying to find that NVIDIA crash, the one of our developers like tried playing with just the graphics turned off, like they just had the minimap, and they played literally to the end of Act 2 with just no graphics, and they're like, and the funny thing was like, what the hell? How did you even manage to get through 2 acts like that? And he's like, oh, Huntress OP. I was like, okay, like this is so it is actually possible to play entirely with the minimap, no graphics at all, apparently.
Yeah,
but, yeah,
that's fun. No, I would love that.
Yeah. I want to change that imminently. The thing with the
un desarrollador estaba testeando tratando de conseguir el problema de Nvidia y jugó sin gráficos hasta el final del acto 2. Y dijeron, ¿cómo hiciste para jugar sin ver nada? Y le dice, es que la Huntress está OP.
Just enable seeing the res.
I agree.
It's probably
I like that.
I agree.
I like that.
Jonathan dice que simplemente vamos a habilitar para que puedas ver los raros desde el principio.
Delirium, it seems very fast. Obviously, we're a bit slower now. Any thoughts on Delirium speed?
I very specifically made a number of builds and tested them just before this O2O release. And I was actually surprised how well I was doing. And I was like, okay, like I thought this was a big problem, and I was like, I'll just actually go and actually test it myself. So it could be like, okay, I'd like to know a bit more here, I guess, which is like, is it certain maps over others?
Yeah, because 100%. Like, because it still expands like a donut, right?
Yeah, which we do, and we do kind of have to balance it around probably the bottom. Maybe it's, yeah, sure. There's probably a point where it's balanced around an assumption of like being more acceptable maps instead of the worst ones, and so I just need to shift that assumption and then change it. But yeah, I did specifically personally test this on a number of characters pre-O2O, and I was actually I was like, I expected it to be way worse than it was. That being said, I wasn't using like a massive range of maps for testing that. I was like, you know, probably 5 or 6 different things on many different characters. So, yeah, sure. I will look at that as well. I'll add it to the today list.
Están viendo lo que tiene que ver con Delirium.
It's going to be a big day.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys doing this. So obviously PoE, you're not necessarily tied to like the warrior being melee, right? Like right now I'm playing artillery ballista. Would it be possible to implement some sort of favored system that I can just tick like artillery ballista with a little heart on it, so then when I go to like level up those gems, I don't have to in the bottom left search artillery ballista and tick the...
I would suggest just having a tab for equipped gems would be the way to do that.
Yeah.
Like you just have a tab that just shows you the equipped gems, and you just click on
Perfect.
And level up that way.
Me gusta la idea de Jonathan.
All the classes, then my gems, and then all gems is probably what it should be,
Yep. I like it.
Another question.
Listo, estamos todos de acuerdo.
Hammer ability. I was watching, I have not used it myself, but I saw Quinn69 using it, and it looked pretty painful with like a little like ting, tink, and then going out and hitting twice. Any improvements to that?
So there were meant to be some changes that we made to this that I even
así,
specifically spoke about, I think, with maybe Darth and Gazzy or whatever when we had that last one. And those changes didn't occur. They have occurred locally. They should be in a imminent patch coming out.
Awesome.
Like that's... it somehow got missed, I think, or I don't know. I actually don't know what happened there, but that was a sheer mistake, straight up.
Okay.
Fue un error. Algo le van a hacer a eso, pero creo
Whenever,
que
so there are
dure
multiple
que sí, que el
skills that
mapa o algo
can
así.
use chargers. A few players have reported that like they might want to use chargers on a specific skill. Would there be a way to like deactivate that a skill uses chargers, but you still want to use that skill, but you don't want it to be empowered?
Oh, eso es
This was
interesante.
something that came up like probably about 3 or 4 days before we shipped. Actually, with I mean, you talk because I mean the obvious case is barrage on the Huntress, right?
Yeah.
Like whether or not you want to do that. So I
Quieres
think, like, I have to look into whether or not this is
un
gonna be
skill,
okay,
pero no
but
quieres
we
consumar
could have a
cargas.
support gem that does that like gives some other power boost but says it can't consume charges or something, and then that way you could use that with barrage if you wanted to disable it for that or something like that. So I think that'd probably be the way. But I have to think about exactly what that should be. But something along those lines would be the way.
Should work.
O sea, tenemos una forma como de
I have a
decirle
little
cómo
like, just
deshabilitarla.
interesting question about how do you feel like class identity revolves more around weapons, right? Because like I'm a warrior build, but a lot of people would inherently think like warrior is maces. But yeah, like the class identity is more around the weapons themselves. And I was curious how you feel about that.
Well, we explicitly moved to having 12 classes partly because of that, like to make that the case. Like we want that, and this is actually was driven part like I mean, so when we were talking about like adding weapon types and so on, there was this thing where we're like, okay, if you're, you know what it actually was? It's okay. So we had the spear base type, and we're like, okay, because this is like way back, like a long time ago. We're like, okay, what is going to make a person who selects a ranger ever switch to spears and do that? That's just incredibly unlikely to actually happen. It's like ultimately the purpose of the classes at the start are kind of to give you a stereotype to like to go to. Now you don't have to follow that, obviously, like everything's open, but giving players like a thing where they're like, okay, like I know what I'm going to do, like I'm going to do this thing. It's like, it's kind of important for new players to have that happen. So I think it is overall very positive and kind of like why we
Una
did that
pregunta un
in the
poco
first
más
place. And,
filosófica
like,
de
evidence of
qué les
that in
parece
PoE
que
1
la
is,
identidad de las clases parece estar ligada al arma
like, even
más
though
que con la
there's this whole thing
ascendencia.
about being able to become a melee ranger,
O sea, tipo que un warrior es
es
mazos.
it takes a long time for
Una
someone to even
ranger,
experiment with that
es
if they're a new player.
arcos.
Like they just wouldn't even cross their mind to like change weapon type like that once they've already started. So effectively just due to that, we needed to have some way to make it so that, you know, from the very beginning you kind of know, like you've got some idea in your head about what kind of thing you want to play.
Okay. Yeah.
Hablando un poquito de eso,
The
no
next
es tan
question is
importante.
about corrupted items.
No,
and
está
you
importante con lo que estamos
added,
hablando aquí.
in my opinion, a very fun
Pero es
new
cool.
unique strongbox. Actually, whoever made the Venter strongbox, chef's kiss. Love that thing. Please put it in PoE 1 as well. Coolest thing ever. But I find corrupted items a little frustrating too, due to quality and sockets. I don't know if the answer is just like that they always have quality and sockets, but obviously it's items that we can't recombinate anyway. And I just want to hear your thoughts on a balance pass from that. It's very frustrating to get a really cool unique that is or rare that is effectively useless.
Yeah. Something needs to change there. Like it isn't right.
We actually removed some corrupted drops before 020 went out, and then because we were like, wait, hold on, getting corrupted items just sucks. Like this isn't a good thing you want. So
Está
like,
hablando
corrupting
de
an item of your choice
los
is great.
sockets en los ítems corruptos particularmente.
So we just straight up
Se siente mal tener un ítem, buen ítem que
no
tiene sockets, apesta, no lo puedo usar entonces.
Do something with them.
Cool.
This 100% just like, what is this random white corrupted item on the ground? Like, that is never going to be of use to anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
So we just need to fix that for sure.
Cool. Is there a possibility of the runes being added to the currency stash tab?
Oh, runas a la currency stash tab.
I believe we would. So what was
We're adding a socketables affinity.
Yeah.
We're adding a bunch of affinities. I think it's like socketables, fragments, which will include tablets.
Yeah.
And obviously fragments. Breach and or catalysts.
Cool.
Expedition and dust,
afinidades,
also logbooks and the
más
currency.
afinidades,
You know, we're adding a whole bunch of them. I think there's 5, 6, 7 maybe different affinities that we're meant to be adding within, like, you know, I would expect to see that within a week probably is my like
En una
guess.
semana probablemente. Afinidades.
We're not going to add that. This is like currently it has the whole, you have to have the stash tab in order to have the affinity, and we're like having to divorce that a little bit so that we can just have the affinities with, because the tabs take longer to make. And so that we're doing that work currently, and I would expect to have all that. So you can use your premium quads, whatever, you know, to stash all of those.
Cool. Actually, almost through with all of my questions here. So this isn't something, sadly, that I've been able to interact too much with. But I wanted to talk a little bit about recombinators anyway, and just see if you guys have looked into the data a little bit. Obviously, I've seen a clip of, for example, Karn having like the 0.91 chance to recombinate. Just what do you guys think of recombinator use this early, basically?
I don't think we've even had enough real
that's kind of waiting for more info and data there for sure. I did worry that there'd be that people would start seeing those very low values because they're using extremely rare item modifiers or numbers of mods, and getting like, oh my god, it says less than 1% or less than 2, this whole system sucks.
There was a real like it's interesting because like with recombinators, I feel like every time we've ever even looked at them, they've always got this thing of like this tension between like they're so OP and yet also they look so underpowered. Like when you like, they've got this like horrible tension like that. However, what I do think that this system is, compared to the previous one, is so much better is that if you're using them for the like low number of mod cases, then like you can get relatively.
Si yo estuviese la cabeza del juego, jamás los pondría.
Weights. But we do have the ability to do more specific balance here if we want to. So like we'll just adjust it. Like honestly, I have to admit, like I haven't even recombinated anything on live myself yet. So like, you know, like it's just not it's not, I can't
Jonathan acaba de
really say
decir
anything
que
about.
jamás ha recomendado nada en su
It's
vida.
something I haven't.
Like I just don't know how it feels enough, you know.
There were 2 major item systems that I was like expecting to get a bunch of feedback on, and then would calibrate. One was recombinating, and the other, which I am very thoroughly looking for, and maybe you have some opinions on it, is how the new map drop progression works. And I know there is there's one thing I changed last night, which is to make it a bit easier to get guaranteed maps from the fixed last rare and last final boss. But the other thing is there is currently a bug which I saw, which is sometimes the boss's drop isn't +1 level, which, I don't know how that happens, but I saw that bug. But assuming those are fixed, I am very curious to know and kind of just get people's, you know, feeling on that. I've seen some people get through the tiers very, very quickly, which is fine because they have proven that they can, and that's fine, and they weren't at the whims of the RNG as much. But I'm looking for a lot of feedback on that, and I'm hoping to start getting a bit more of that as people get into endgame.
I have anecdotally heard people telling me that they're happier with how endgame is now than how it was in 0.1.
I have also heard that from, but again, very anecdotally. So
especially when it comes to sustain, I'm the wrong person to ask, because I was shocked at one of the previous podcasts when people were saying they were struggling with sustain. So I thought it was funny when you basically said skill issue.
That was also the case for us, which is why we changed it.
So that's why we just were like, let's fully redo this.
So I'm the wrong person to ask for about sustain, and obviously there's no issues for me with sustain now. I've talked to my community a little about this, and it was pretty split with the new, like, how you unlock Atlas points. A lot of people didn't like it. I personally like it a lot more. I had a strong dislike for the do 10 tier 1 maps, do 10 tier 2 maps. So I love the new way, but a lot of people in my community didn't. So you're definitely going to have to get more feedback there. I'm just not 100% sure. I think
a Zizaran le gusta el nuevo progreso.
Dice
que mucha de su comunidad
struggling to
no les
see
gustó.
the corruption. So maybe even like some sort of indicator of like like not an arrow, but like more.
When you say C, do you mean in the, like out of the fog of war or in the fog of war?
Both, I guess. Like just like, do you know the way we have the beams towards the pillars right now? I guess people
that's why I'm asking. Well, like, are you saying just like physically you don't see them when they're revealed, or
just before the patch went out, we were like, we actually did go, do we want these to be visible in fog of war or not?
Yeah.
And they were, by the way. And then we were like, I think maybe actually we don't, because you're going to spend too much of your playtime just looking in fog of war, and I want you to be looking in the revealed section more. And so that's why I did change it, so that some things are in fog of war, but it's like not that many. So towers and citadels being that, and then
but you could have like a very short distance, maybe. Or something like that,
but we don't currently have a distance in fog of war. You can see it's just either it is or it isn't, and so maybe we can mess with that and have it be like, you can see
Makes
like
sense.
you know, some depth in or
Tengo que
something.
jugar un
Like that, just
poquito
to
más
make
el
it a bit
endgame
better,
para
But
hablar aquí,
just
porque
for myself, I
estaba
like
muy
to know.
lento.
Yeah.
Pero básicamente quieren
So that's
poder
about the
ver
Atlas
la
points, if
corrupción
you do get any more, and of
desde
course, if you
la niebla de
happen to
guerra.
get a collective from your community in particular as well, and of course people are going to post it. You have my Discord as well. Just tell me, because I'm very curious about the map drops and how people feel about now that it's like way more deterministic for both sustaining and going up the tiers. Now, obviously, not a huge amount of people collectively as in the end game, but like it's enough to start getting stuff. So, I'd really like to make sure we got that right. So, if any of that comes up, just give me a yell.
I have one last question about PoE 2, and then I have a few quick fire questions about PoE 1, and then we're done. How do you feel about the removal of clear speed, things like Herald of Ice, but then sort of adding it back in with effectively a few players are telling me the Lightning Strike and Aroa effectively just swaps it from Herald of Ice to the Roa and the Lightning Strike?
Well, lightning.
I don't know whether or not the balance of those is correct, quite frankly.
It's not quite like there's probably misbalance here, 100%, but it's not quite the same as what the Heralds were doing. But it is still a balance anomaly for sure. Like I certainly have people playing, I know people who are playing Lightning Archers right now, and they're like, why am I suffering like this? I'm going to swap to Lightning Spear, which I assume is what you meant.
Root 2 made me promise to ask that.
So look, it's pretty clear. It is their number one played build right now is Lightning Spear Amazon, and that for good reason, right? Like, it wasn't the
Lightning
intention
Spear es mejor
to be
que
like,
Lightning
we
Arrow
removed this thing
wow.
and added this thing. That
¿Quién
isn't
diría?
intentional, that it ends up playing that
Así
strongly
que,
and
sí.
that powerfully. And
Yo
it's like a
claramente lo
clear,
sé,
like,
jugué toda la campaña con eso.
I mean, just use it and the whole screen implodes, right?
But the trouble we have now
Good
is,
to see you.
like, you know,
Double
this
follow.
is what people are doing now.
Yeah.
And we nerf that. Like, you know.
No,
like,
that's fair.
The answer is usually that we can't very easily.
That's fair.
So, you know.
Yep. So, a few PoE1 questions and then nothing. Do we have a rough estimate at all for 326?
Estimado para
I mean,
3.26.
are we telling people? Have we said anything about that?
I think we were like, I think last we said was A and around that territory, or at least towards the latter half
you
of May.
cut out. You cut out.
No, sorry, I'd said nothing. I was just pretending. No, towards the end of May was what we last said, and the intention is still
Finales de
that
mayo.
is currently on track. Obviously, all these things are kind of like, you know,
Finales de
up to
mayo.
within a 2-week kind of band, because you know things happen. That being said, if you're not hearing about things by the end of May, or at least, then I'd be very surprised. You should be for sure.
Para finales de mayo vamos a estar escuchando cosas.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any chance of WSD in PoE1? Have you thought more about it?
WSD en Path of Exile 1?
It's not really a question of thinking about it. It's a question of like, I mean, I would put it in tomorrow if we could.
Yeah.
The problem is that the
mañana si pudiéramos.
character rigs are just not set up for it. And so
Los
I
rigs
will
del
just mention
personaje
like
son
kind
un
of like the
problema.
long-term plan here. So once every microtransaction from PoE 1 works in PoE 2, at that point, it will mean that we could then port the character rigs from PoE 2 back to PoE 1 and rig the old character models and items onto them, and that would then mean that we would have access to the animation library and everything that we have in PoE 2 in PoE 1, which would then mean that we could put WASD in, basically. So what I'm saying is that like,
dude,
like,
I'm so hard right now,
this
dude.
will take a while, right? But like in the long term, this can happen. But like it would effectively like
Jonathan, good.
Yeah, we always sort of imagined that we would take the PoE 2 character rigs and put them back to PoE 1.
Bro,
Eso
me puso caliente, lo que acabo de decir.
But it requires 100%. Obviously, we can't turn a microtransaction off in PoE 1 you already bought.
Una vez que pasamos a las microtransacciones de Path of Exile 1 a Path of Exile 2, significa que los personajes de Path of Exile 2 pueden ser los de Path of Exile 1. Una vez que hagamos ese cambio, significa que podemos usar todas las animaciones de Path of Exile 2 para Path of Exile 1. Y significa que podemos poner WSD en Path of Exile 1. Y cualquier cosa que hagamos va a ser mejor en ambos juegos.
PoE 1 character models. Like character rigs, that means that it just reduces our workload a crap ton.
O sea que sabemos exactamente cuándo es ese momento. Cuando todas las microtransacciones de Path of Exile 1 están en Path of Exile 2, that's it.
Spending probably the majority of their life all rigging microtransactions to PoE 2 characters right now. That is what they're doing. So
I mean, eventually it will get to the point where that is the case.
Cool. I have the same question, but with pausing. So for PoE 1.
That one, I think that they even tried to do that.
It was almost there.
It was almost there, and then there was like a couple of things. So, like, it is our intention to get that in.
Awesome.
Van a poner pausa en Path of Exile 1.
Another thing that I really love in PoE 2, the highlight effect. Like when I right-click a transmute, and it shows like what items this works on.
Eso es muy cool.
Really nice quality of life.
Right. Well, I mean, there shouldn't be any reason we can't do that, right?
Cuando tocas una currency, sabes que se te ilumina lo que puedes usar esa currency. Te viendo si eso puede estar en Path of Exile 1. Y están pensando si hay alguna razón por la que no pudieran hacerlo.
Stuff like that, 100%. It's either we're just not going to. It just won't. You know, it won't just happen.
Cool. Final question is: Vol orbs in PoE 2 can change the magnitude of unique items. Is that something we could ever see in PoE 1?
No.
Well, the amount of work that it would take. So here's the thing, right? Like that for every unique. We, you know, have manual work to do to work out what to do there.
Yeah.
And obviously in PoE 2, given that there weren't all the uniques made already, like, you know, we were able to do that. So, like, I'm not going to say never in PoE 1, but just the amount of work it would take to, like, look at the balance of every single
Las valores pueden cambiar la magnitud de los valores en Path of Exile 2, y eso lo podemos tener en Path of Exile 1, y dijeron, es demasiado trabajo. Que no es un no para siempre, pero tomará mucho trabajo. Así que no quieren prometer nada ahorita.
That was all the questions I had. Thank you so much for taking time to do this. I know this was super welcome by me and the community. We really appreciate it. I know it was a bit combative today, but I promise it's from love for the game.
Well, actually,
and,
so at the beginning, I obviously got out of bed on the wrong side of the bed this morning because I was feeling a little bit anxious, probably more than I should have done, and I apologize for that because that was probably not great. But yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just kind of, as I said, was just feeling a bit,
I appreciate it. I actually,
Gracias por el super, Pucho.
you know, compared to most, I think we came out of this one with like, here's like actually like 15 changes we're just going to go make like immediately, which is awesome. And some we knew about, some we didn't, and some and a whole bunch of discussion. So like,
Jonathan también acaba de decir que siente que hoy se paró mal de la cama, así que siento que estaba como un poquito más compatible de lo que debería estar, así que se disculpa por eso.
It'll help, but like, it is good because I mean, at the end of the day, it's just creating that collaborative environment between developer and player base that, and using users as the intermediary. And I'm sure a lot of these opinions yourself, you're part of that. But it is very important that we keep doing this because it will create greatness.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys coming here. I've actually, like, as a rule for my podcast, I actually took something Jonathan said to heart really, really hard that I really liked. And you said that you really like when the interviewer, like, when it's their questions and not just on behalf of others, because they're able to do better follow-ups and stuff. So I've tried hard to focus on that as well, that it's things that I am able to do follow-ups on. So, but yeah, thank you guys so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for watching.
I like it.
And playing.
Yeah. We appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
Nice.